Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We are tracing the full, and I mean often really turbulent institutional, political, and of course athletic journey of Real Madrid Club de Football.
Right.
This is the story of how a pretty modest club, officially set up in 1902, navigated decades of just immense conflict and controversy to become the undisputed first champion of European football in 1956.
And this deep dive is really about the architectural blueprints of a global sporting empire. I mean, we're not just here to list off trophies.
No, not at all.
We're analyzing the strategic vision, the political forces at play, the huge infrastructure projects, and that one single seismic player signing Alfredo Di Stefano that just accelerated everything.
Completely changed the game.
It did. The source material you've shared gives us the complete DNA of this transformation, spanning right from the intellectual roots of football's arrival in Madrid all the way up to the foundation of the dynasty that now holds a record 15 Champions League titles.
So that really sets our mission to understand how ambition and, let's be honest, calculated risk turned a post-Civil War institution into an absolute superpower. And this all starts with the very unconventional way football first arrived in the Spanish capital.
It's fascinating because unlike coastal cities like Bilbao or Barcelona, where the sport was often brought in by, say, British sailors or through trade routes.
The usual story.
Usual story, exactly. Madrid's introduction was purely intellectual. It was academic.
So how did that work? What was the actual mechanism?
It came through an institution called the Institución Libre de Enseñanza, or ILE. This was a really progressive educational movement in Spain, totally dedicated to modernizing the country's education system.
Okay.
And what the ILE did, very consciously, was recruit scholars from prestigious English universities, we're talking Cambridge and Oxford, to bring in new methods, new ideas. And football was one of those imports.
So it wasn't just a recreational thing brought by workers, it was actually a scholarly import. But why would this intellectual elite be so drawn to, of all things, a foreign sport?
It connects directly to the national mood of the time, the late 19th century. Spain had just suffered this crushing defeat in the Spanish-American War of 1898.
Right. They lost their final colonies.
They lost Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines. It led to this deep national pessimism. So for the intellectuals around the ILE, football, with its emphasis on structure, on teamwork, fair play, all those English ideals, it represented national regeneration.
A way out of the gloom.
Exactly. It was seen as this modern, healthy vehicle to escape that post-imperial malaise and, bring in a new, more optimistic Spain.
That context gives the sport a huge symbolic weight from the very beginning. And that initial curiosity, it pretty quickly formalized into Madrid's first organized club.
It did. By December 1897, you see the foundation of Sky Football Club. It was made up of those ILE students and academics.
Okay.
They played on the grounds of Moncloa, usually early on Sunday mornings. But the crucial thing to remember here is that it was, initially, a highly exclusive society.
Yeah.
It was for and by the intellectual class that founded it.
But that kind of elitism couldn't last, right? Not with a game that was becoming more and more popular.
No, it couldn't. The sources show a fragmentation that leads directly to the founding of what would become Madrid Football Club.
So there was some kind of internal conflict.
A lot of it. It's pretty common in these new amateur organizations. Around 1900, dissent started to bubble up inside Sky Football. You had members who wanted a more open, more accessible club.
And they broke away.
They broke away. Key figures were Julian Palacios, who was sort of the first de facto president, and the very influential Padros brothers, Juan and Carlos.
Okay.
They formed a new club, initially called the Nueva Sociedad de Fútbol.
And the official founding date that the club celebrates today, when did that happen?
That's when the organization legally solidified its status, March 6, 1902. They formally renamed the club Madrid Football Club. Juan Padros was the legally registered president.
And the meeting itself was pretty humble, I understand.
Oh, incredibly humble. The foundational meeting took place in the back room of a place called El Capricho. It was the Padros family's small clothing and general store. Not exactly a grand boardroom.
So the philosophical core that they established in that back room, it seems like a direct contradiction to the exclusivity of its predecessor, Sky Football.
And that is the essential founding principle that defines Madrid to this day. Unlike those earlier elitist clubs, Madrid Football Club was founded explicitly on the principle of democratic accessibility.
So open to everyone.
The founders wanted football to be a mass sport, open to all social classes. It was a very deliberate move to draw in people from the city's emerging middle and professional classes, not just the aristocracy or the academics.
How many members did they start with?
It was a small group, Only about 28 to 30 socios members who also held ownership status, but they were all defined by this principle of openness from day one.
And the visual identity, the famous white kit, was out there from the start, too.
Yes. The iconic all-white home kit was chosen right from the inception. It was meant to symbolize purity, transparency, tradition.
Is there a reason why they chose white specifically?
Well, the source material draws a pretty direct line between this choice and a famed English amateur team called Corinthian. They were known for their elegant style and their strict sportsmanship.
So it all comes back to those English intellectual ideals again.
It really does. It's all about that idea of national regeneration through a clean, modern sport.
And they played as Madrid FC for nearly 2 decades. The famous Real title, the Royal Crown, that was an acquisition that came much, much later.
A monumental shift in status. That happened on June 29, 1920. King Alfonso XIII, recognizing the club's growing stature and its connection to the capital, granted the honorific title Real, which means royal, via a letter to the club president at the time, Pedro Parajas.
So what were the actual, tangible benefits of getting that royal patronage? Was it just a name?
It was primarily symbolic, but that symbolism had incredibly powerful practical consequences. The club was immediately permitted to put the royal crown into its crest.
Which instantly elevates your prestige.
Massively, nationally and internationally. This association with the monarchy, even as the monarchy itself was kind of entering a period of decline, it provided a crucial shield, a symbolic weight. It instantly elevated the club to Real Madrid Club de Football and set them apart from their rivals.
Okay, so they're establishing their identity. Moving into the next phase, from 1902 to 1936, this is where they have to establish their competitive footing. But the national structure of football in Spain was still messy.
Messy is a good word for it. That fragmentation was their biggest early challenge. I mean, there was no unified national league until 1929, so the whole landscape was regional and chaotic.
And they didn't have the same kind of strong regional identity as some of their rivals.
Exactly. Madrid struggled to build the kind of commercial and regional identity that a club like Athletic Bilbao had, which was rooted in the Basque industrial heartland, or Barcelona, which was so deeply tied to Catalan identity. Madrid didn't have that ready-made base.
So their breakthrough didn't come in a league, it came in the National Cup competition, the Copa del Rey.
This is where Madrid found its rhythm. On April 18th, 1905, they got their first major piece of silverware. They beat Athletic Bilbao 1-0 in the Copa del Rey final. It was played right there in Madrid. Manuel Prast was the goal scorer.
And that one victory launched a pretty unprecedented run of success for the time.
It really did. They achieved the remarkable feat of capturing 4 consecutive Copa del Rey titles from 1905 all the way to 1908. This showed that, despite the fragmented structure, Madrid FC was quickly becoming a formidable power.
But even in these early years, we start seeing the seeds of controversy being planted, especially in that growing rivalry with Barcelona.
The 1916 Copa del Rey semifinals are a perfect example of this. The sources note a series of just fiercely contested matches. It was a knockout competition that required replays.
And Madrid eventually won.
Madrid eventually advanced over Barcelona, but the victory came with significant baggage. The sources explicitly state, and I'm quoting here, with assistance from controversial refereeing decisions by former Madrid player José Berrondo.
Wow. So even back then.
Even back then. Before the massive political controversies of the 1940s, this perception of, let's say, competitive advantage or favorable treatment was already starting to take root.
Institutionally, though, Madrid was also key in formalizing the sport nationally.
It played a central role. In 1909, Madrid Football Club became a founding member of the Royal Spanish Football Federation, the RFEF. Their involvement in that process really formalized their position within the emerging national structure.
And that paved the way for professionalism.
Which was something the old guard had really resisted. But yes, it was inevitable.
And that move to professionalism finally culminated in a proper national structure in the late 1920s.
Yes. 1926 saw the formal approval of the first professional football regulations in Spain. Then, the big one. In 1928, the Spanish Football Federation founded La Liga, the first unified national championship. This changed everything.
It turned local rivalries into a national battle.
Absolutely. The stakes were suddenly so much higher.
Madrid didn't win the very first season, the inaugural 1928-29 season. They finished as runners-up to Barcelona, but they quickly established their dominance in this new structure.
They learned from that initial loss. They won their first league title in the 1931-32 season, and then they successfully defended it in 1932-33. It became only the second club to win back-to-back La Liga championships.
And the spine of that team, it contains some legendary figures who really cemented the club's reputation.
Absolutely. The foundation was defensive stability. You had Ricardo Zamora in goal, who was widely considered one of the finest goalkeepers of the entire early 20th century, a monumental presence.
And in front of him?
Jacinto Quincochas, a central defensive figure whose tactical brain just anchored the whole team. And up front, the team was led by Manuel Olivares, who topped the scoring charts in that second title-winning season with 16 goals.
Now, this early dominance, it coincides precisely with one of Spain's greatest periods of political upheaval. The proclamation of the Second Spanish Republic in April 1931 directly impacted the club's identity.
It was an immediate institutional shock. The new Republican government was, well, inherently hostile to any symbols of the monarchy.
Which they saw as representing the old, failed regime.
Exactly. So the government stripped the club of the real designation and the royal crown emblem. Just gone. For the entire duration of the Second Republic, from 1931 until the end of the Civil War in 1939, the club legally reverted to being known simply as Madrid CF.
Was this just a name change on paper, or did it have real practical ramifications?
It was a full reversion of identity. They had to immediately remove the crown from their crests, from all official documentation, from all their merchandise. It was this very visible reminder that the prestige they'd gained in 1920 was temporary and subject to the whims of the political landscape.
It highlighted their vulnerability.
A vulnerability that would be violently exacerbated just a few years later.
Because that vulnerability was fully exposed when the Spanish Civil War erupted in 1936, bringing all organized sport to a grinding halt.
The Civil War was just devastating. 1936 to 1939. The conflict decimated Spanish football's entire institutional structure. Madrid's competitive trajectory, which had just peaked with those back-to-back league titles, was completely derailed.
The club itself must have been in ruins.
The stadium suffered damage, players enlisted, some were killed, others fled the country. The entire club infrastructure had to be rebuilt from absolute scratch once the dust settled.
Which brings us into our next part. The devastation, the beginning of the reconstruction, and what is probably the most notorious match in El Clasico history, the event that truly forged the political dimension of the rivalry.
We're talking about the infamous 1943 Copa del Generalissimo semifinal. The rivalry had competitive roots, sure, going back in 1916, but this match and its toxic political atmosphere cemented this perception of an institutional divide that, persists to this day.
Let's detail the atmosphere around that second leg in Madrid, because the source material paints a picture of just intense intimidation.
The context is absolutely crucial. The first leg in Barcelona had ended 3-0 to Barcelona. Madrid complained loudly about the refereeing.
So the stage is set for revenge.
Oh, yes. The second leg at Madrid's old Chamartín Stadium. Before the match even started, the Barcelona bus was reportedly targeted and hit with stones as it arrived. Once they got inside, the atmosphere was just poisonous.
What was the crowd doing?
The crowd was hurling constant, politically charged insults at the Barcelona players. Things like Reds, separatists, linking them directly to the defeated Republican cause and Catalan nationalism.
This was psychological warfare, conducted by the crowd in a post-Civil War climate still completely dominated by the victor, the Franco regime.
Precisely. And the sources describe the match quickly just descending into a farce because of the sheer intimidation. Barcelona's goalkeeper, Luis Moreau, was reported to have spent the match defending himself with small stones, rarely even near his goal line, because of the projectiles being thrown from the stands.
Unbelievable. So what happened in the game itself?
Madrid scored twice early, and then came the critical turning point. A controversial red card for Barcelona's Benito Garcia for what the opposing team claimed was a pretty normal tackle.
And the psychological impact of that decision, coupled with the intimidation, it must have broken the Barcelona side.
It did. One Madrid player later recalled that after the red card, the Barcelona players got a bit demoralized. Another Madrid player, though, painted a kind of darker picture of competitive opportunism, saying they thought, go on then, score as many as you want.
And the final score was an astonishing 11-1 victory for Madrid. What was the fallout of a result like that, especially given the clear political context?
The fallout was immense. It reached the highest levels of the regime. The result led to the immediate removal of the referee, and critically, both club presidents resigned. It was just too politically charged to ignore.
And this event is what really defined the rivalry going forward.
It decisively shaped the long-term perception. Madrid became forever viewed as the team benefiting from the dictatorship's tacit approval, while Barcelona adopted the mantle of the politically oppressed victim. This moment turned El Clasico from just a competitive rivalry into a deep institutional and political schism.
It's remarkable that in the middle of this politically charged atmosphere and all this chaos, Santiago Bernabéu gets elected president in 1943, and he looks past incremental repairs and sets forth a truly audacious vision.
Bernabéu's vision was transformative. It was completely counterintuitive for post-war Spain. He recognized that the old Chamartín Stadium, with a capacity of maybe 40,000, 50,000 at a push, was totally inadequate for the club he wanted to build.
So he didn't want to just patch it up.
He refused piecemeal renovations. Instead, he planned for the immediate construction of a monumental, modern facility. His idea was simple, but profound. Infrastructure must come before greatness.
That requires truly massive financial engineering, especially in a Spanish economy that was devastated by war and suffering from international isolation. How on earth did Bernabéu fund a project of that scale?
This is where Bernabéu's strategic genius and his political dexterity really came together. He initiated sophisticated financial fundraising. He sold bonds to Spanish companies. He secured substantial private investment from the professional classes he'd been courting since 1902. And crucially, he also secured contributions and access to resources from the Franco regime itself.
So why would the Franco regime commit resources to a football stadium when the whole country needed rebuilding?
Because Franco's regime saw the value of sporting success as international propaganda. Spain was largely isolated after World War II, viewed negatively by the West.
Right.
Bernabéu recognized that a globally successful Real Madrid could act as a diplomatic tool. It could provide evidence of Spanish vitality and competence. And the regime was very receptive to this, providing support and access to building materials like steel and cement that other, less favored institutions really struggled to get.
That political expediency was central to the stadium's success.
It was absolutely central. The result was the Nuevo Chamartín, which would eventually bear his name.
And it was a landmark achievement.
It really was. It opened on December 14, 1947, with a friendly win over OS Belenenses. Its initial capacity was immense for the time. 75,145 spectators, a mix of seats and standing sections. This stadium wasn't just a place to play, it was a foundational asset. It was built to generate the revenue and prestige needed to attract world-class talent and launch to the next phase of global dominance.
But despite the magnificent new stadium, the period between 1948 and 1952 was still one of struggle. It proved that infrastructure alone isn't enough.
That 4-year period was the transitional phase. Madrid lagged domestically. They struggled to win La Liga, often falling behind Barcelona and Athletic Bilbao. The investment was there, but that competitive spark was still missing.
So what did Bernabéu do?
He used this time for critical institutional modernization and focused personnel acquisition.
And this included building depth, like acquiring Miguel Muñoz Mazun.
Muñoz joined in 1949, a Madrid-born attacking midfielder who brought technical sophistication, consistency, a vital domestic anchor. But Bernabéu's efforts went way beyond just the first team. He formally established dedicated youth academy divisions, what's now known as La Fábrica, and created professional staff structures with specialized technical teams.
Long-term planning.
It was all about long-term planning, transforming the club from just a talented team into a complete modern institution.
Which brings us to part 4, the moment where the foundation met the catalyst. The acquisition of Alfredo Di Stefano in 1953. The sources describe this as the single most consequential event in the club's history.
It fundamentally transformed the club overnight. Bernabéu had built the machine, the stadium, the structure, the revenue streams, but he needed the irresistible engine. Di Stefano was that engine. A superstar with immense skill, physical maturity, relentless energy, and just proven goal-scoring prowess.
But the signing itself is legendary for the chaos and controversy around it. This was less a transfer and more an international legal and jurisdictional nightmare.
That's the perfect way to describe it. So Di Stefano was an Argentine playing for Millonarios in Colombia because of a massive players' strike known as El Dorado. This had temporarily stripped many South American stars of their traditional FIFA registration.
Okay, so his status was complicated.
Very. Now, Barcelona had negotiated his transfer rights with River Plate, his original FIFA-affiliated club. Real Madrid, however, entered into parallel negotiations directly with Millonarios, arguing that they held his current playing registration.
So you have two of Spain's biggest clubs, each claiming exclusive contractual rights from two different South American teams.
Exactly. An impossible situation to resolve contractually. Barcelona believed they had the legitimate FIFA rights, but Madrid controlled the players' current playing status. The dispute escalated all the way up to the Spanish Football Federation, which had to intervene.
And the compromise they proposed has to be one of the most bizarre in sporting history.
It was utterly unique and completely untenable for a player like Di Stefano. The Federation proposed an alternating season arrangement.
You're kidding.
Not at all. Di Stefano would play for Real Madrid in odd-numbered seasons, and for Barcelona in even-numbered seasons, for 4 years.
Alternating seasons for the world's best player. It just speaks volumes about the political pressure the Federation was under.
It shows the desperation to avoid choosing sides. But Barcelona's leadership, sensing governmental pressure and finding the whole arrangement competitively unworkable. Imagine trying to build a team around a star who leaves every summer. They found the terms unacceptable and ultimately withdrew.
They just conceded the player to Real Madrid.
In a decision that remains, to this day, bitterly disputed.
And the financial scope of the transfer also reflects Bernabeu's calculated risk.
It was immense. Real Madrid paid 5.5 million Spanish pesetas for the transfer, plus significant bonuses. And critically, the sources note that Di Stefano's annual salary package alone amounted to 40% of the entire club's annual revenue at the time.
40%? That's not just aggressive, it's almost reckless.
It was. It showed Bernabeu's absolute conviction that Di Stefano was the missing piece.
And that risk was rewarded immediately. The impact was nothing short of transformative.
It was immediate, it was dramatic, and it was psychologically damaging to their rivals.
Yeah.
Di Stefano made his debut against Barcelona.
Of course he did.
And Madrid won 5-0. A spectacular victory, with Di Stefano scoring multiple goals. That single performance immediately validated the financial gamble and demoralized the club that had just let him slip away.
And that momentum carried them right to the top, ending a 2-decade-long drought.
In the 1953-54 season, Di Stefano scored 27 goals in 30 league matches. He was instantly the league's most dominant force. And Real Madrid won La Liga, their first championship in 21 years, dating all the way back to 1933.
It was the ultimate validation of Bernabeu's entire reconstruction strategy.
Everything he had been building toward finally paid off.
And the following year, they not only defended the title, but also proved they were ready for a bigger stage.
The 1954-55 campaign was a declaration of intent. They defended La Liga, setting a new record with 46 points. But, crucially, they also won the Latin Cup. This was a tournament for the league champions of Spain, Portugal, Italy, and France. By beating elite European rivals in this precursor competition, they were signaling their readiness for a continental stage.
Di Stefano's impact wasn't just his own goals, though. It was his ability to elevate the talent around him.
That is the hallmark of a true dynasty builder. His presence created this irresistible gravitational pull for other world-class talent, and he had the tactical intelligence to optimize the players already there. The best example is Paco Gento.
Gento, the Spanish winger with that prodigious speed, the gale of the Cantabrian Sea.
Gento's early career at Madrid was deeply uncertain. He didn't score a single goal in the 1953-54 season, and Bernabeu was thinking about loaning him out, doubting his finishing.
But Di Stefano stepped in.
The source material notes Di Stefano intervened personally. He argued forcefully for retaining Gento's raw, innate physical talent, and this proved to be a decisive piece of judgment. Gento's speed, combined with Di Stefano's playmaking, developed into an unstoppable attacking combination. Gento went on to win 5 consecutive European Cups.
Other complementary signings cemented the squad depth during this crucial time.
Absolutely. They added the Argentine forward Hector Real in '54, who was a crucial goal-scoring threat alongside Di Stefano. And on the defensive side, they got Marquitos in '54, an athletic defender who brought much-needed stability. This wasn't just signing stars, it was meticulous team construction.
Which all leads us into the ultimate validation, the inaugural European conquest in 1955-56. The European Cup.
We're looking at the 1955-56 European Cup season, which, we all now call the genesis of the Champions League.
Right.
But it was more than that. It was an inflection point where club football shed its local skin and became this pan-European cultural force. And it was all centered around the team that mastered it first, Real Madrid.
And that mastery was anything but guaranteed. We're going to trace the tournament's origins, which were born from sheer journalistic outrage at British parochialism, explore the revolutionary tactical approach led by Alfredo Di Stefano, and relive the dramatic final that established Real Madrid's reputation for resilience, the famous remontada.
And we've relied on a stack of fascinating sources for this. Historical accounts, contemporary match reports, analysis from that whole period between 55 and 1960.
Yeah.
They bring to life the vivid details of the tactical system they nicknamed the White Ballet.
Okay, let's unpack this. And we have to start with the spark that set the whole thing on fire.
The creation of the European Cup, it didn't come from a boardroom or a committee. It came from a newspaper office.
Right.
It was driven by a powerful sense of indignation, and the whole story really begins in England in late 1954.
And to truly appreciate the context, you have to remember the deep psychological scar English football was carrying at that moment.
That is the absolute key. For decades, England had considered itself the originator and the unquestioned superior of the game. But then, between 1953 and 1954, they suffered those two brutal, humiliating defeats to the Hungarian national team.
The Magical Magyars.
The Magical Magyars. They lost 6-3 at Wembley, which was seen as a national disaster, and then even worse, 7-1 in Budapest. English confidence, that sense of isolationist superiority, it was just shattered.
So when the reigning English League champions, Wolverhampton Wanderers Wolves, had a couple of good friendly results late in 54, it was seized upon as this national redemption story.
It was a desperately needed psychological balm. Wolves defeated Spartak Moscow 4-0, which was a good result, but the critical victory was the 3-2 win against the legendary Honvéd Budapest.
And Honvéd was the core of that Hungarian team, right? With Puskás and everyone.
Exactly. They were the heart of that dominant national team, including the incomparable Ferenc Puskás. So beating them, even in a friendly, it felt like conquering the conqueror.
And the English media just ran with it.
Oh, they ran with it. The resulting media frenzy was massive, but in retrospect, stunningly narrow-minded. The Daily Mail led the charge with a front-page headline that was short, punchy, and just, utterly declarative. Hail Wolves, champions of the world now.
Wow.
The implication was clear. If they could beat the best club side from the strongest national team, well, the argument was closed.
And this assumption, this declaration of global superiority based on a couple of friendlies, it travels across the channel and lands in Paris, right on the desk of Gabriel Hanot at L'Équipe.
And Hanot, who was this highly respected veteran journalist, a former French international player himself, was absolutely incandescent. He saw this English claim as totally parochial, a failure to recognize the true depth of European football talent. He argued that the English were just trapped in this self-congratulatory bubble.
And his argument was brilliant in its simplicity.
It was. True champions, he wrote, must face the best of the continent. Real Madrid, AC Milan, the mighty Yugoslavian and Central European sides, and not just in one-off friendly exhibitions.
Right. They had to do it in a formal, structured, two-legged competition.
Played on their rivals' home fields. You couldn't be a world champion until you had defined the parameters of the continental game itself.
So he didn't just complain. He proposed a solution.
Immediately. Hanot, along with his L'Équipe colleagues Jacques Godet and Jacques Ferrand, wasted no time. They used the paper's considerable platform to launch the idea for a formal pan-European club competition. They proposed a tight, structured, two-legged knockout tournament.
And they even figured out the logistics, suggesting it should be played midweek to avoid disrupting domestic schedules.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how the idea gained momentum entirely outside the official governing bodies. UEFA, which was only just inaugurated in June 1954, wasn't really ready to take on something this ambitious.
That's a crucial point. UEFA was brand new.
Brand new, and its primary focus, structurally and financially, was on supporting national team competitions. So when the idea was presented at the UEFA Congress in Vienna in March 1955, the executive committee was highly hesitant. They were resistant to leading the project.
They saw it as too complex.
Too complex, too demanding, and too potentially disruptive to their fledgling organizational structure.
So L'Équipe basically just bypassed them. They went straight to the people who held the real power in European football at the time, the biggest clubs.
Precisely. It was a classic power move. In April 1955, L'Équipe took charge and invited representatives from 16 of the most prestigious, wealthy, and successful European clubs to Paris.
Creating a mandate from below.
Exactly. The clubs approved the proposed regulations and generated this irreversible momentum. This initial push from the economic elite of the sport was the necessary fuel.
And even FIFA, which I read initially preferred reviving older regional cups like the Mitropa Cup, couldn't stop it once the major clubs were on board.
They recognized the inevitable. They ultimately authorized the new competition, but only under the authority of UEFA and on the condition that participating clubs got explicit permission from their own national associations.
A compromise.
A compromise, yeah. And FIFA mandated the official name change to the European Champion Clubs Cup, which gave it a veneer of official recognition it initially lacked.
Let's talk about those original 16 clubs, because their composition really highlights just how experimental the entire process was. I mean, it was by invitation, not strict qualification, right?
It was a very mixed bag, reflecting prestige and often practicality over strict sporting merit. You had the champions, of course, Real Madrid, Stade de Reims, AC Milan. But the criteria for selection got messy pretty quickly.
And we see that glaringly with the Scottish entry.
Oh, yeah. The Scottish FA chose Hibernian, who had finished fifth in the league, over the actual national champions, Aberdeen.
Why? I mean, that seems crazy today.
The sources indicate a single logistical reason that seems ludicrous now. Hibernian was one of the only clubs in the entire country to have permanently installed floodlights at their ground.
No way.
Yes. In the mid-1950s, playing midweek evening games was a novel concept, and only those with the proper infrastructure could really participate.
It's an incredible illustration of how modernizing infrastructure, not just sporting success, dictated who got a seat at the table. We also saw Servette from Switzerland, who only finished sixth, getting an invite.
And then, of course, there's the great absence.
Chelsea.
The English champions, Chelsea. They were invited, initially agreed, even got drawn against Djurgården of Sweden. But the English Football League was vehemently opposed.
They called it a distraction to domestic football.
An unacceptable and dangerous distraction. The pressure was immense, and Chelsea were forced to withdraw.
Which they did. That withdrawal left this gaping hole and delayed English participation in the European elite for a crucial year. Chelsea was replaced by Guardia Warsaw of Poland,
which added a little layer of Cold War geography to the field.
And speaking of geography, we have to mention the unique inclusion of Saarbrücken.
Saarbrücken participated as the representative of the Saar Protectorate, that tiny, semi-autonomous region situated between France and Germany in the post-war shuffle. The Saarland was eventually unified into West Germany in 1957, but its inclusion in this tournament perfectly captures the fragmented and politically complex European map that this unifying football competition was trying to transcend.
A cultural and sporting bridge in a fractured political landscape.
The moment this new tournament was conceived, there was one club uniquely positioned to dominate it: Real Madrid. And this wasn't accidental. It was the result of a decade of aggressive strategic planning by one man.
Santiago Bernabeu, the club president, the visionary architect.
Appointed way back in 1943, Bernabeu's ambition was truly global. He wanted to build a club that wasn't just domestically successful, but a world-class institution that symbolized excellence. And this was particularly resonant at a time when Spain, under Franco's dictatorship, was so politically isolated.
And his ambition was visible in concrete and steel. He built the structure necessary to house a global superpower.
He did. Bernabeu spearheaded the reconstruction and massive expansion of the club's ground. By 1955, the stadium was renamed the Estadio Santiago Bernabeu, and it boasted this imposing capacity of 120,000 spectators.
Which was just monumental at the time.
It dwarfed the capacity of virtually every other club in Europe. It was designed from the ground up to be an intimidating fortress.
And the sources connect this infrastructure directly to the necessity of the European Cup. It wasn't just about sporting glory for them, it was about economic survival.
This is a crucial, often overlooked point. Bernabeu had taken immense financial risks to fund this monumental construction and the growing professionalization of the team. National League gate receipts alone, even with 120,000 seats, could not sustain the cost of maintaining such a gigantic structure and attracting world-class talent.
So the European Cup wasn't a luxury for Madrid, it was a required revenue stream.
Exactly. The need for prestigious international competition that generated significant media interest, higher ticket prices, and the promise of future prize money was absolutely necessary to make the financial model of the new, massive Bernabeu Stadium viable.
They embraced it instantly because they needed it.
They needed its platform to fund their ambition.
But the truly transformative moment wasn't concrete. It was flesh and blood. It was the arrival of Alfredo Di Stefano in 1953.
His recruitment is cited repeatedly as the single most important turning point in Real Madrid's history, maybe even in Spanish football history. But you have to remember, His arrival was mired in controversy.
The Barcelona connection.
It was a complex, incredibly contentious transfer saga that famously involved rivals Barcelona, who also claimed ownership rights through a different intermediary.
And there's a lot of talk about the government's role in resolving that dispute.
It's highly disputed, but it's widely believed to have involved political intervention. After months of legal wrangling, the Spanish Football Federation, under pressure from higher administrative offices, ruled that Di Stefano should play alternating seasons for both Barcelona and Real Madrid.
Which is just an insane ruling.
It's unthinkable. Barcelona, citing political interference and feeling completely robbed, ultimately refused this settlement and sold their rights to Real Madrid outright. This contentious signing immediately elevated Real Madrid from a top Spanish side to a continental powerhouse.
And he didn't just score goals. He fundamentally changed how the game was played. He was the catalyst for a tactical revolution.
He was the total footballer, long before Rinus Michels or Johan Cruyff institutionalized the concept in the 70s. Di Stefano was the linchpin, the thinker, and director who simply refused to be constrained by the rigid positioning of the era.
So the standard formation back then was the WM, right? A 3-2-5 structure where players typically stayed in their designated zones.
And Di Stefano just exploited that rigidity ruthlessly. His movement was a psychological weapon. He would routinely drop deep into his own half to collect the ball from the defense, effectively becoming an extra midfielder or even a second center back for a moment.
Which forced his marker, the opposing center half, to make an impossible choice.
Exactly. Follow him and you drag a huge hole in your defensive line. Or stay put and you leave Di Stefano completely free to launch attacks.
That created overloads in the midfield and forced the entire opposing defense to break their disciplined shape. It was utterly revolutionary for the 1950s.
It was an act of tactical genius. He orchestrated play from deep and then surged forward to finish the attack he had started just moments earlier. His versatility and leadership established him as the godfather of modern football.
So, the man who brought order to this chaos, who translated Di Stefano's revolutionary movement into a coherent team philosophy, was the manager, José Villalonga.
Villalonga was a young, insightful manager appointed midway through the 1954-55 season. He immediately embraced Di Stefano's fluidity, instilling a tactical approach that emphasized attack, rotation, and pure flair, the style that was quickly dubbed the White Ballet.
That name, the White Ballet, it requires a deeper definition than just attacking flair, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It refers specifically to the highly coordinated rotational movement of the five forwards: Di Stefano, Joséito, Real, Maloney, and Gento. When they moved together, they looked elegant and coordinated like dancers on the pitch, constantly interchanging positions to confuse defenses.
And Villalonga's framework, a highly flexible 3-2-5, was designed to maximize the space Di Stefano created.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was supported by the steady hand of Captain Miguel Munoz, the main distributor, and the clinical finishing of Hector Real.
And you cannot forget Francisco Gento.
You cannot. He was the ultimate vertical threat, the fleet-footed winger. In an era of slower, more methodical defensive structures, Gento's blistering pace on the left flank was an absolute cheat code. He stretched the field and provided the immediate counterattacking option that made the White Ballet so devastatingly effective.
And let's not forget the incredible fact, Villalonga remains the youngest manager ever to win the European Cup. He was barely 36 years old when they lifted that trophy.
It just underscores how swiftly and decisively this dynasty was built.
With their revolutionary system in place, Real Madrid entered the inaugural tournament, and the journey began quietly but historically on September 8th, 1955.
Their first European match was away against Servette in Switzerland, and it was Captain Miguel Munoz who edged his name into the records.
Right. It was played in Geneva in front of a modest crowd, only about 7,000 people.
And the match was tense. It took until the 74th minute for Munoz to score the club's first ever European Cup goal, finally breaking the deadlock. Hector Real then sealed the 2-0 victory late on.
A quiet prelude, but that first goal really defined the future captain's legacy.
It did. But the return leg, however, served as this massive statement of intent, announcing the arrival of the new European superpower.
The October 12th return leg at the newly renovated Bernabeu was a spectacle. Over 40,000 spectators watched Real Madrid just unleash their attacking machine in a 5-0 rout.
A comprehensive 7-0 aggregate victory. This wasn't just a comfortable win. It established the Bernabeu as a terrifying, imposing fortress for any visiting side.
But the path was not smooth. The quarterfinals presented a genuinely harrowing test, one that became foundational to the club's mythology, the battle against FK Partizan in what the sources call the Crucible of Belgrade.
This tie demonstrated the brutal diversity of continental football. The first leg in Madrid was deceptively comfortable, a 4-0 Christmas Day victory.
Madrid must have thought they were home free.
They thought they had a foot, or perhaps both feet, in the semifinals. But the return leg in Yugoslavia was a completely different story. The conditions were almost impossible.
Harrowing is the only word for it.
The match on January 29, 1956, was played in a relentless blizzard. The pitch was completely covered in a thick, heavy blanket of snow. The beautiful, fluid, white ballet philosophy just dissolved instantly under the physical pressure in the elements.
So you had a team built on quick passing and elegance suddenly forced to play an ugly physical battle they weren't prepared for.
And Partizan, driven by desperation and the elements, were relentless. They surged to a 3-0 lead. The sources described the goalkeeper, Juan Alonso, as being nearly disoriented by the driving snow, struggling to track the ball.
Real Madrid's composure just failed them.
Completely. They even missed a penalty kick that could have settled the tie. Partizan star Miluj Milutinovic, who would end the tournament as top scorer, spearheaded a continuous assault.
And they needed just one more goal to force a playoff. How did Madrid survive?
Pure desperation, luck, and last-ditch defending. Alonso pulled off several impossible saves in those closing minutes. The source reports from the time stressed the miraculous nature of their survival. They lost 3-0 on the night, only advancing 4-3 on aggregate.
And that near collapse established the essential suffer away but go through narrative that is so deeply ingrained in the club's DNA today.
Absolutely. So, having survived the physical test of the Eastern winter, they immediately pivoted to the tactical sophistication of the South in the semifinals against Italian giants AC Milan.
Milan was stacked with formidable, world-class talent, including the Uruguayan playmaker Juan Alberto Schiaffino and the Swedish goal machine Gunnar Nordahl.
This was a clash against acknowledged peers, not just enthusiastic newcomers.
The first leg in Madrid, however, was another attacking spectacular.
It was a thrilling night. Real Madrid took a decisive, though precarious, 4-2 home victory with goals from Real, Joseito, Olsen, and of course Di Stefano. But Milan's 2 away goals were a huge warning sign that the tie was far from over.
They had the firepower to make a comeback.
They absolutely did. And the return leg at the San Siro must have been a tense, nerve-wracking affair, especially after the trauma of Belgrade.
It was a complete contrast to the Partizan match. Instead of brute force and elements, this was a display of tactical sophistication.
Milan won the match 2-1, but Real Madrid showed they could hold their nerve against a highly organized and hostile crowd. Their disciplined defense and ability to score a crucial away goal meant they advanced 5-4 on aggregate, proving they could mix tactical discipline with their attacking flair.
It's incredible to see just how chaotic and open football was in that era, before deep defensive tactics became commonplace.
The statistics are mind-boggling, and they really define the inaugural tournament. The entire 1955-56 European Cup was characterized by hyper-attacking football.
How many goals were scored in total?
A stunning 127 goals were scored across just 29 matches.
Wow.
Which averages out to a colossal 4.38 goals per match. Compare that to modern European competition, where 2.5 is often considered high.
And Real Madrid were right in the thick of that chaos.
Absolutely. Their own record leading up to the final reflected that philosophy. 18 goals scored and 11 conceded in just 7 matches. Their approach was clearly to prioritize offensive firepower and simply gamble on outscoring the opposition, a strategy that carried significant risk, as we saw in Belgrade.
All of the drama, the tactical experimentation, and the immense political and economic weight of Bernabeu's ambition converged on one night, the inaugural final. June 13th, 1956.
The setting was the Parc des Princes in Paris, a poetic choice, given that the tournament was conceived in a Parisian newspaper office.
Right.
But it naturally gave their opponents, Stade de Reims, a significant home field advantage.
And Reims, the French champions, were no pushovers.
Far from it. Under manager Albert Bateau, they played what was affectionately called champagne football. Fast, fluid, and exciting. And they boasted their own magnificent playmaker, Raymond Kopa.
The attendance of almost 40,000 was heavily French.
The atmosphere was electric. And the referee, Arthur Edward Ellis of England, had the weighty responsibility of controlling the first ever European club championship match.
10 minutes in, and the entire Real Madrid project, the Bernabeu investment, the white ballet philosophy, it was all on the brink of collapse. The start was an unmitigated disaster.
It truly was. A shock opening that put that Belgrade resilience immediately back to the test. Real Madrid trailed 2-0 inside the first 10 minutes.
Wow.
First, in the 6th minute, Michel Leblanc found the net with a powerful left-footed strike. Then, just 4 minutes later, John Templin tapped in a second goal, assisted by the brilliance of Raymond Kopa.
2 goals down in the biggest match in club history. What was the reaction in the stadium?
The French fans were erupting, convinced the inaugural trophy was already sealed. Panic was definitely setting in, but the key to this Real Madrid team was the instant, decisive psychological response orchestrated by Di Stefano.
He was the one who shifted the momentum.
He was. The sources highlight that Di Stefano didn't panic. He simply took control. In the 14th minute, he pulled one back with a clinical right-footed shot.
Stemming the immediate panic.
Exactly. And then at the 30th minute, Hector Real, the clinical inside left, leveled the score at 2-2 with a header from a Joseito corner. They'd completely absorbed the shock and recovered equilibrium by halftime.
The second half became a relentless end-to-end duel, and Reims proved their own quality by reclaiming the lead.
They absolutely did. Stade de Reims came out fiercely. In the 62nd minute, Michel Hidalgo headed in a goal from a Raymond Kopa free kick, putting Reims ahead 3-2. Madrid was trailing again with less than 30 minutes to play.
The history of the entire tournament was hanging in the balance.
It was. And this brings us to the moment that modern analysts always cite as the true turning point, the goal that sources say broke the resolve of the French side. And it came from the most unlikely source.
A defender surging forward.
The central defender, Marquinhos. In the 67th minute, he abandoned his defensive post, pushing forward aggressively into the attack, a complete risk, especially when trailing. Following a scramble in the box, he struck a decisive right-footed shot into the net, leveling the score at 3-3.
That willingness for a central defender to commit forward, to take that risk in a critical final moment, perfectly encapsulates the aggressive, attack-first philosophy Villalonga had instilled.
It was an act of pure will, and it truly deflated Reims. Having equalized, Madrid pressed for the final blow. The winning goal arrived in the 79th minute.
Gento.
Francisco Gento, using his blistering pace, provided a pinpoint pass across the face of the goal, and Hector Real finished, securing his second goal of the night for a 4-3 lead. Real Madrid held on for the last 10 minutes, confirming their status as the inaugural European champions.
And the victory came with a truly incredible, almost ruthless subplot involving the French team's star, Raymond Kopa.
The Kopa story is a perfect reflection of Santiago Bernabeu's cold, calculated ambition. Kopa had played brilliantly for Reims in the final, arguably outshining everyone except Di Stefano. He had assisted 2 of the 3 Reims goals.
But
Bernabeu, showing utter ruthlessness and pre-planning, had already secured Kopa's signature days before the match was even played.
Wait. So Kopa played the most important match of his club career against his future teammates, knowing he was essentially wearing the wrong uniform. That is an astonishing power move.
It is pure ambition personified. Kopa was destined for the White Ballet regardless of the outcome. He joined Real Madrid for the 1956-57 season, completing the legendary attacking lineup that would dominate the next 4 editions.
The first title wasn't an endpoint. It was just the acquisition phase for total continental control.
The inaugural title immediately validated the genius of José Villalonga. He wasn't just a placeholder. He was one of the game's great, pioneering managers.
His success was immediate and comprehensive, proving that the White Ballet was a sustainable winning formula.
In his first full season, 1955-56, Villalonga achieved a double of La Liga and the Latin Cup, in addition to the European Cup. He followed that in 56-57 with a treble of La Liga, the Spanish Cup, and his second consecutive European Cup.
It's instant, unprecedented success.
It was. And what's interesting is his ability to take that success and transplant it elsewhere, proving his adaptability. He proved he was no flash in the pan tied only to Di Stefano.
He went to Atletico.
He later managed Real Madrid's fierce city rivals, Atletico Madrid, and achieved immediate success there too, leading them to victory against Real in 2 successive Copa del Generalissimo finals. He also won the European Cup Winners' Cup with Atletico, and then led the Spanish national team to victory in the 1964 European Championship.
And the DNA of the club's leadership was also established right there on the pitch in 1956.
Think about Miguel Muñoz again. He scored the club's first ever European Cup goal. His career didn't peak there. He transitioned into coaching, leading the team to their 5th straight European Cup win in 1960.
We're an incredible run.
Muñoz managed the team for a staggering 14 years and holds the historic distinction of being the first person ever to win the competition as both a player and a coach. The continuity from that inaugural team into the club's golden age of management is just unparalleled.
Beyond the pitch, That 1956 victory took on an enormous significance for Spain, which was still, a pariah state in the mid-1950s.
It did. Spain was trying desperately to emerge from the deep international isolation imposed by its status under Franco's dictatorship. The regime quickly realized that Real Madrid's dazzling international success, the elegance, the winning, the global headlines, was the perfect public relations tool.
They became the regime's best embassy.
Precisely. The success was systematically leveraged to project an image of a modern, vibrant, and successful Spain, actively countering the international skepticism and revulsion towards the dictatorship. Foreign Affairs Minister Fernando Maria Castilla famously called the club the best embassy we have ever had.
And the success was so integrated into the national narrative that one journalist put the 5 European Cups on the same historical level as monumental political treaties.
The journalist, Francisco Sarcedo, writing years later, made this ironic but profound statement that the 3 decisive events of the period from 1950 to 1960 were the signing of the Concordat with the Vatican, the Pact with the United States, and the 5 European Cups.
That quote brilliantly encapsulates just how powerful and pervasive the narrative of sporting success became in defining Spain's self-image.
It does. And this political utility extended into the transfer market, specifically concerning players fleeing communist regimes in the East. The regime used the recruitment of players like Frank Puskás, who joined in '58 after the Hungarian Revolution, and Ladislau Kubala at Barcelona, as tools of anti-communist propaganda.
These players were often granted Spanish nationality as political refugees.
Right. And Puskás specifically became a huge symbol for Madrid. Real Madrid's ability to negotiate the lifting of his UEFA ban allowed him to join the team and become an even more powerful international symbol of anti-communism. It was a masterful use of soft power.
But perhaps the single most enduring legacy that stems directly from that inaugural final is the characteristic that defines the club to this day, recognized by fans and rivals alike.
The comeback spirit. The refusal to be beaten.
The remontada.
The remontada. The 1956 final victory, coming back from that disastrous 0-2 deficit against Reims, is explicitly taught and understood within the club's history as the original template for Real Madrid's characteristic resilience in Europe. That match cemented Di Stefano's status, not just as a great player, but as the leader who instilled that non-negotiable standard of refusing to concede defeat. It was the moment the myth was born.
What a story. The 1955-56 season was truly the big bang moment for modern football. The audacious creation of the European Cup, the revolutionary white ballet tactics forged by Villalonga and Di Stefano, and that defining 4-3 win over Reims that gave Real Madrid the cultural foundation for the next 7 decades of dominance.
The ultimate takeaway is that the first European Cup proved that true footballing excellence required navigating a unified, diverse, hostile atmosphere of continental competition. The launch of the tournament moved the sport irrevocably past parochial domestic structures and onto a larger, grander stage that respected no national boundaries.
And as we've discussed the deep link between Real Madrid's global triumphs and Spain's attempt at political reemergence, it raises a historical question about European integration that goes beyond football.
We know that formal political integration in Europe was tentative and slow in the late 50s. Political projects often struggled for visibility and popular appeal. However, the cultural and social space for football, driven by massive crowds, high-stakes matches, and mass media broadcasts across borders, was already powerfully unified by 1956.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Did the emergence of the European football space, with its tremendous popular support, emotional resonance, and shared heroes, contribute more to the European emotional wiring and the feeling of continental unity among ordinary citizens than the political architects attempting to build integration through treaties at the same time?
Fascinating thought.
Think about that first great 7-goal thriller broadcast across a divided continent, uniting people culturally through shared drama long before politics ever could.
An utterly fascinating parallel to consider. It gives new weight to the power of sport.
Absolutely.
This deep dive is so crucial because, as you said, 1957 marks the year the European Cup really stops being just a promising idea.
It becomes an institution. It transforms into this entrenched, indispensable part of the football calendar.
And significantly, that institutionalization, it happened on Real Madrid's terms, didn't it? With the victory that really solidified their claim to a dynasty.
Absolutely. We've scoured the source material, and what we've found details these contrasting philosophical paths of both finalists, the intense socio-political baggage that Real Madrid carried, and of course, the deep, enduring controversy surrounding the decisive moments of the match itself.
Okay, let's unpack that a little. The stakes here went far, far beyond just the silverware.
Oh, for sure.
This was a clash between two emerging footballing philosophies. You had the nascent Spanish school, defined by this, offensive brilliance and sheer star power.
And on the other side, the rising Italian school, built on structural integrity, defensive discipline. It's a classic matchup, really.
Historically, the outcome was a 2-0 victory for Real Madrid. But what really defines this final, and what we have to underscore right from the get-go, is the venue.
The Santiago Bernabéu.
Their home.
That's the critical historical marker. I mean, this victory marked the first time in the competition's entire history.
You mean the entire history, right?
Right.
Including the whole Champions League era.
The entire 7-decade history, yes. The first time a club hosted the final in its own stadium and successfully lifted the trophy, it was quite literally Madrid's home coronation. A moment of, well, unprecedented power projection for a single club.
And that home coronation, as our sources make abundantly clear, is still deeply steeped in controversy, especially in Florence, almost 7 decades later. We need to acknowledge that core dispute right up front.
You have to. The entire tension of that match, it all hinges on that critical first goal scored in the 69th minute. Real Madrid's Enrique Mateos was eventually fouled, which led to a penalty awarded by the Dutch referee Leo Horn.
Okay, but it wasn't that simple.
Not at all. If you look at the contemporary reports, any slow-motion analysis, you see 2 major officiating errors happening at the same time. First, the linesman had his flag up.
Or offside.
Clearly flagged Mateos for offside in the build-up, but Horn ignored it. And then second, the foul itself, even if you pretend the flag wasn't there, it really appears to have been committed outside the penalty box.
So a double dose of error.
A double dose of error that drastically, and you could argue unjustly, altered the dynamic of a game that Fiorentina had, until that very moment, perfectly controlled.
Our mission, then, is to peel back all these layers. The institutional growth, the controversy. We need to understand how the tournament secured its global footing in the second year.
And contrast the journey of the two teams, the disciplined path of the Viola against the star-powered resilience of Madrid.
And most importantly, we have to dedicate significant time to analyzing the individual genius of Alfredo Di Stefano, who, in this season, really demonstrated the traits that defined him as the prototype for what we now call the total footballer.
All right, so to truly gauge the impact of this 57 final, we have to recognize the profound step the competition took that season. The 1956-57 campaign wasn't just a renewal of the first one.
No, it was a confirmation.
It was the campaign that cemented the European Cup as a permanent, unshakable fixture in the sport.
And the numbers from that year, they illustrate this institutional appetite perfectly. The sheer scale of the growth in just 1 year is, well, it's astonishing.
It is. The tournament expanded from 16 to 22 participating teams. That's 21 national associations from all across the continent.
And we're talking about a dramatic increase in the number of games played. 44 matches in total.
Generating 170 goals, which, if you do the math, comes out to an average of 3.86 goals per match. That tells you something about the attacking, open style of the era.
It was entertainment.
Absolutely. But perhaps the most telling figure, the one that really shows the buy-in from the public, is the attendance.
Okay.
The cumulative attendance for those 44 matches was over 1.84 million people.
Wow.
Which means the average attendance for any given European Cup match was 41,840. That proves this competition was rapidly becoming the single biggest draw in European sport.
It's moving beyond just national rivalries.
Right.
It's creating a genuine continental spectacle that people were willing to pay and travel to see.
Exactly. And the single biggest step in securing that global legitimacy, that final stamp of approval, it came from the island nation that had, well, traditionally remained pretty skeptical of continental projects.
You're talking about England.
Absolutely, the English entry. The previous year, the English champions, Chelsea, were famously prevented from participating.
Right, by the isolationist mandate of the English Football League and the FA.
That's right. The English establishment, they feared the disruption to their traditional league schedule. They viewed continental competition as a fleeting distraction, something that undermined their sense of domestic supremacy.
That attitude had defined the English game for decades, really. So what changed in '56? What made that isolationist stance completely untenable, allowing Manchester United to step in?
I think the change was driven by the sheer excitement and prestige generated by that first final. The world saw the spectacle, and manager Matt Busby,
A true visionary.
a true visionary, he recognized that continental football wasn't just the future, it was the present. And he made the decisive, and at the time very controversial, move to enter his young, exciting team, the Busby Babes, into the competition. He did it in defiance of the initial wishes of the league.
And that move provided that final necessary stamp of approval. When the reigning champions of England, the traditional powerhouse of world football, acknowledged the European Cup,
The competition's legitimacy is secured across the entire globe, especially in the English-speaking world. And the fact that United had such a deep run all the way to the semifinals in that first season for them only amplified the prestige.
So now let's pivot to the structural advantages enjoyed by the reigning champions, because Real Madrid was, from the very start, positioned to dominate this new institution, not just on the pitch, but structurally and financially.
That's a crucial point. As defending champions, they were granted a bye directly into the first round, a nice little perk.
But beyond just that sporting privilege, our sources detail a really interesting administrative maneuver, I guess you'd call it, concerning their automatic inclusion.
Yes, and this administrative element highlights their emerging power as a massive drawing card for the whole tournament.
Okay, so what happened?
Due to the reunification of the Saarland region with West Germany, a free berth in the tournament was suddenly created. And UEFA, being acutely aware of the star power and drawing capacity of Di Stefano's Madrid side, strategically awarded this free berth to the defending champions.
So it ensured their participation no matter what.
It ensured their participation regardless of any potential technical qualification issues. It really underscores the commercial reality of the time. The new European Cup needed Real Madrid more than Madrid needed the Cup. And the organizers, well, they acted accordingly.
And this structural advantage was married to an aggressive financial strategy that really defined the future of the sport. They weren't just relying on their existing stars.
No, they were already perfecting what we'd now call the super club acquisition model.
And the prime example of that is Raymond Kopa.
Precisely. They bought Raymond Kopa, the magnificent French playmaker. What makes this acquisition so profound is that Kopa was the star of the opposing side, Stade de Reims, in the 1956 final.
So they literally defeated their main opponent and then immediately purchased their best player.
That's it. It cemented what we now recognize as the Galactico blueprint. You bolster an already elite squad with the absolute best individual talent available on the planet. Kopa, they called him the Pequeño Napoleon, the Little Napoleon. He was a creative master, and his vision would be instrumental in this second victory.
This brings us inevitably to the complex, non-sporting implications of Real Madrid's ascent. We're talking about the socio-political backdrop of the Franco regime.
Yes.
And we have to discuss this impartially because it's absolutely integral to understanding the context of the club's success. This wasn't merely athletic triumph. It was, in many ways, a function of statecraft.
That's a very powerful way to put it, and it's accurate. General Franco's dictatorship, which ruled Spain from 1939 to 1975, was defined by profound, decades-long international isolation.
Spain was viewed with a lot of suspicion by the democratic nations of Europe.
Deep suspicion. And it was excluded from a lot of the initial post-war economic planning, like the Marshall Plan. So when the European Cup began, Madrid's victories immediately provided the regime with a vital diplomatic tool. Our sources call it the perfect PR tool.
It's a classic example of weaponizing soft power through sport.
It is. The international visibility and success of Real Madrid projected an image abroad of a wealthy, successful, modern, unified Spain.
Which was entirely contrary to the geopolitical reality of a dictatorship.
Completely. The Bernabeu became this massive, highly visible stage for Spanish excellence. It was a key mechanism to alleviate that geopolitical suspicion and isolation. And this projection wasn't accidental, it was orchestrated. The victories were heavily promoted by state-controlled media, and the matches themselves became vital events for hosting foreign dignitaries, trade partners.
So the club was a successful, modern, visible entity that could mask the underlying repressive political conditions.
Yes. And domestically, the club's hegemony symbolized the power of centralization and the traditional Castilian values that the regime endorsed.
Right, which stood in stark contrast to regional clubs.
Most notably, FC Barcelona, an athletic club in the Basque Country, whose regional identities, languages, and demands for cultural recognition were actively suppressed by the regime. For Franco's government, Real Madrid's triumph was a demonstration of a unified, centralist Spain that was successful on the global stage. It provided both a domestic distraction and an international veneer of success during a really critical period of the Cold War. The club was an active primary vehicle for national identity projection.
So let's turn now to the 1957 pitch itself and the two finalists, because they had such philosophically distinct journeys to get to the Bernabeu.
Very different paths.
Let's start with Fiorentina. Their qualification was a landmark moment for Italian football.
A huge moment. They'd won the 1955-56 Serie A title, and by reaching the final, they became the first Italian club ever to achieve this feat. They were a fascinating counterpoint to Madrid, introducing this early form of the structural rigidity that would come to define Italian dominance later on.
And their success, it stems directly from the tactical sophistication of their manager, Fulvio Bernardini. His system, it wasn't the ultra-rigid catenaccio that we associate with, the 1960s.
No, not yet. But it was certainly built on a deeply disciplined tactical approach. The focus was on defensive solidity and absolute structural integrity.
That distinction is key, isn't it? Our source material details these specific roles that showcased his tactical foresight.
It does. I mean, consider the left half, a player named Armando Salgado. He operated in what was effectively a proto-libero role.
So not just a defender.
Not just a defender, but a sweeping layer of protection positioned behind the main defensive line. He was designed to cover space and intercept through balls.
That sounds incredibly modern for the mid-50s. So they weren't just defending, they had tactical innovation in their attack too.
They did, particularly in how they utilized Maurizio Prini as a tornante.
Which literally translates to a returning winger.
Exactly. Prini was tasked with retreating deep into his own half to provide defensive cover, especially on the flanks. But the moment possession was won, he was expected to just accelerate forward. This movement allowed the inside left, Miguel Montuori, to push higher and function almost as a supplementary center forward. This flexible defensive structure made them notoriously difficult to break down.
And that disciplined approach, it was tested right away in their first round.
It was. They faced IFK Norrköping of Sweden. After a tense 1-1 draw at home in Florence, they secured a decisive 1-0 away victory. Giuseppe Virgili netted the winner. That away win right there, it demonstrated their composure and their effectiveness in hostile environments.
And in the quarterfinals.
Against Grasshoppers of Switzerland, they showed a more offensive punch, winning 5-3 on aggregate, a 3-1 home win followed by a 2-2 away draw. So they proved they possessed tactical versatility, they could score when necessary, but control was always the priority.
But the true definition of their journey, the moment that really showed their readiness for Madrid, that came in the semifinals against Red Star Belgrade.
This was the ultimate test of Italian pragmatism. The series was a grueling, low-scoring, two-match affair. A real tactical chess match. The first leg in Belgrade remained goalless deep into the game.
A true struggle.
Until the 88th minute. And who scored the vital breakthrough? Maurizio Prini.
The Tornante.
The Tornante himself, securing that invaluable away goal, clinching a 1-0 advantage.
So the player who was tasked with running back and covering defensively delivers the decisive offensive blow.
Exactly. Then back in Florence, they delivered the defensive masterclass. They executed a flawless tactical stalemate, securing a 0-0 draw, which meant a 1-0 aggregate victory over two legs. This victory underscored their structural integrity, their willingness to prioritize discipline over flair. It signaled they were tactically equipped to frustrate even the rampant Madrid offense.
Okay, so by contrast, Real Madrid's road to the final, despite all their star power, was far from smooth.
Not at all.
The narrative of the 1957 European Cup is often about their inevitable dominance, but they were genuinely vulnerable and tested right out of the gate.
The first round against the Austrian champions, Rapid Wien, was a definitive scare. It very nearly ended their title defense before it even really got started. At the Bernabeu, they won the first leg 4-2, and they looked pretty comfortable.
But the return leg in Vienna was a nightmare.
An absolute nightmare of epic proportions. It was a hat-trick performance by the legendary Ernst Happel.
Right.
He put Rapid Wien up 3-0 on the night, which made the aggregate score 5-4 in favor of the Austrians. Madrid was staring down elimination with just minutes left on the clock.
But Di Stefano salvaged it.
Di Stefano salvaged the situation with a crucial late goal, leveling the aggregate score at 5-5. And this is where the historical rules become so critical.
The away goals rule didn't exist yet.
Not implemented until 1965. So a full playoff match had to be organized. You have to imagine the psychological and logistical pressure of having to play a third winner-take-all match against the same opponent just to survive the first round.
And they ultimately had to use their home ground advantage again.
They did, winning the playoff 2-0 with goals from Joseito and Copa. But that crisis series, it really defined their season because it forced a major tactical adjustment.
What was this specific tactical change Di Stefano was forced to adopt?
Our analysis shows that rapid wins, their physical pressing, and their counterattacking brilliance forced Alfredo Di Stefano to drastically drop deeper into midfield, particularly in that playoff match.
To do what?
To help win possession, to organize the defense, and to launch attacks from a much deeper position. He realized his traditional striker position was too easily neutralized by aggressive marking. This evolution, transforming from a pure center forward into this midfield conductor, is the key precursor to his total footballer status, which allowed him to control the entire field.
After surviving that scare, the quarterfinals against the French champions, Nice, were comparatively easier.
A lot easier. A dominant 6-2 aggregate win, with Mateos and Di Stefano being prolific in front of goal. But the semi-final against Manchester United, that was the series that gave the competition its continental gravitas.
A clash of titans.
Absolutely. Pitting the established masters against the youthful, thrilling energy of the Busby Babes, this was a battle for the soul of European football. And the scale was immense.
How many were there?
135,000 spectators were packed into the Bernabeu for that first leg. That number alone shows you the cultural magnitude of the contest.
And Real Madrid's technical sophistication and experience, it ultimately triumphed over United's youthful energy.
They secured a decisive 3-1 home win. But the second leg at Old Trafford, that demonstrated their champion resilience. Copa and Real scored in the first half, putting the tie mathematically out of reach. And while a young Bobby Charlton and Tommy Taylor mounted a comeback to draw the match 2-2 on the night, Madrid advanced 5-3 on aggregate. This progression, navigating an elimination crisis against Rapid and then overpowering the youthful ambition of Mano Jude, Madrid had the resilience and technical supremacy to match their incredible star power. They were ready for their home coronation.
So, May 30th, 1957. The stage is set for this home coronation. Let's put the listener right there. The Bernabeu was a colossal, intimidating stage, built to host moments just like this. And it was filled to beyond capacity.
The sheer size of the crowd is staggering. The official attendance is cited at 124,000, though some contemporary estimates went even higher.
And for context, few modern stadiums, even today, reach that capacity.
Very few. So to have 124,000 highly partisan fans generating noise and pressure for a final against a foreign opponent, it was an overwhelming display of psychological power that Fiorentina had to contend with the moment they stepped onto the pitch.
And that psychological advantage was so pronounced that Fiorentina actually sought to neutralize a potential tactical advantage before the whistle even blew. It revolved around the lighting.
Yes, the kickoff controversy. The match was originally slated for 8:00 p.m. local time.
So under the lights.
Exactly. But Fiorentina's manager, Fulvio Bernardini, successfully requested the match be moved forward to 5:30 p.m. And the reason was, the Italian side, they were unfamiliar and unaccustomed to playing under the powerful, early artificial floodlights of the modern Bernabeu. They genuinely feared that the home side, being better practiced under elimination, would gain a subtle tactical edge as the evening darkened.
A very sophisticated preemptive move to control the variables.
Extremely shrewd.
So despite the earlier kickoff, let's look at the starting formations. Madrid's manager, Jose Villalonga, he employed a fluid 3-2-5, the classic WM formation of the era.
The WM formation was the default attacking shape of the time. 3 defenders, 2 halfbacks, and 5 forwards. But Madrid personalized this aggressively. Their offensive flow was built on 3 interlinked components. First, you had Raymond Kopa, the creative spark on the right.
Right.
He brought a crucial element of pausa. It's a French term for slowing the game down, drawing defenders in, and controlling the tempo of the attack.
Then you had the conductor in the middle.
Alfredo Di Stefano. The commanding general, playing centrally but with complete freedom to roam, he was the brain of the operation, dictating where and when the pace would shift.
And then the raw, unstoppable pace of Francisco Gento.
Gento was the physical manifestation of Madrid's lethal counterattack. His nickname was perfect. La Galerna del Cantabrico, the gale of the Cantabrian Sea. His role was to occupy that left wing, forcing the defense to stretch vertically and horizontally, knowing that if he got a step on you, no one could catch him.
So Fiorentina, under Bernardini, they countered this with their distal and defensive block.
Their plan was crystal clear. survive the early onslaught, and frustrate the Giants. They relied on the consistent, high-level shot-stopping abilities of their goalkeeper, Giuliano Sarchi, and the highly disciplined organization of their captain and defensive general, Sergio Servato.
And their counterattacks.
They were rare, but they were vital. They hinged on the technical quality of the Brazilian winger Julinho and the forward Miguel Montori. They required surgical precision on the break.
Given that immense defensive discipline, it's really not surprising that the first hour of the match was a tense, agonizing tactical stalemate for the home fans.
The Bernabeu grew palpably anxious. Fiorentina's defensive structure was, well, the word used was exemplary. They were absorbing constant pressure and frustrating every single wave of white attack. Sancho was forced into making several crucial saves to deny Madrid any early breakthrough, particularly on shots from Di Stefano and Mateos. For 69 minutes, that Italian structural integrity held firm. Fiorentina proved that their disciplined journey to the final was no fluke. They were neutralizing one of the most potent forward lines in history.
The tension was almost unbearable until that 69th minute, the moment that shattered Fiorentina's defensive wall, but did so under this heavy cloud of doubt that remains to this day. We have to break this moment down in painstaking detail, focusing on the highly scrutinized decisions made by referee Leo Horn.
This specific play is the defining, controversial turning point of the entire final. Real Madrid's Enrique Mateos advanced, was tackled by a defender, and Horn points directly to the spot. But the controversy immediately became twofold, as sources from both sides attest.
Okay, so let's start with the first ignored infraction, the offside.
Prior to the contact, the linesman, the referee's assistant, had his flag clearly raised. He was signaling that Enrique Mateos was in an offside position in the build-up phase leading up to the foul.
But Horn?
Horn, despite the clear and visible instruction from his assistant, inexplicably waved down the flag and allowed play to continue until the contact occurred.
So had the rules been applied correctly by the central referee, the play should have already been stopped for offside before any foul was even committed.
Correct.
But then we move to the second controversy. The location of the foul itself.
Even if we ignore the offside flag, which you can't, but let's say you do, the location of the foul contact is highly, highly disputed. Contemporary analysis and later reports strongly suggested, and most Fiorentina sources still maintain, that the contact on Mateos occurred outside the penalty area line. The referee appeared to have misjudged the boundary, essentially awarding a penalty kick for a foul that was, at best, a free kick, and at worst, an offside, not a hat.
It was an astonishing sequence of ignored signals and faulty judgment on the biggest stage in global football. And it fundamentally decided the contest. Despite the protests from the furious Fiorentina players, Di Stefano stepped up to take the penalty.
And Di Stefano, the Argentine general, he was ice cold in that pressure cooker. He converted the spot kick, 1-0. This goal was psychologically devastating for Fiorentina. It shattered the mental barrier that their exemplary defense had created, and, crucially, it maintained Di Stefano's remarkable streak of scoring in every single European Cup final to that date.
And for Fiorentina fans, this incident remains a fiercely debated source of bitterness. A perceived injustice that handed Madrid the momentum.
Absolutely. The goal immediately forced the Viola to abandon their deep, disciplined posture. They now had to seek an equalizer. And that necessary tactical shift, pushing players forward, it played directly into Real Madrid's greatest, most lethal strength.
Because they left space behind.
They left space behind, a weakness that Madrid's terrifyingly fast forwards were built to exploit. Just 6 minutes later, in the 75th minute, Madrid delivered the decisive second goal.
And this goal was pure, unadulterated Francisco Gento.
It was. Gento received a pass, often credited to Munoz or Zarga, originating from deep in the Madrid midfield, and he immediately unleashed his defining characteristic, his frightening raw speed. He just exploded into the sudden gap created by the tiring Italian backline.
He used that acceleration, living up to his nickname, the Gale of the Cantabrian Sea, to just burst past the overstretched defense.
The space was his. He slotted the ball past Giuliano Sarchi, doubling the lead and securing the trophy beyond any doubt. That second goal, it perfectly symbolized the lethal nature of this Madrid side. Surgically precise vertical passing from deep, combined with Gento's elite speed to immediately punish any tactical imbalance or exposure. The victory, 2-0, confirmed Madrid as the continent's new dynasty.
So the 1957 final, confirmed by that controversial but decisive 2-1 victory, it was far more than just a second trophy. It was the establishment of a sporting dynasty.
It really was. Real Madrid became the first team to successfully defend the trophy. marking the second chapter in what would become an unprecedented run of 5 consecutive European titles.
And this success didn't just solidify Real Madrid's status. It was vital in consolidating the European Cup itself, wasn't it?
100%. The initial final in '56 had been a chaotic, thrilling 4-3 comeback spectacle. The '57 final, played in that monumental atmosphere of the Bernabeu, was about champion control, patience, and eventually clinical dominance, even if it was facilitated by external factors. It confirmed the European Cup as an indispensable fixture, capable of delivering tactical tension, massive crowds, and legendary drama.
But the lasting tactical legacy of this era, it rests squarely on the shoulders of one man who demonstrated capabilities that were just far ahead of his time, Alfredo Di Stefano. This season, and his performance in this high-pressure final, it cemented his status as the preeminent player of the 1950s and the definitive prototype for the total footballer.
The in-depth analysis of his play at this time is truly mesmerizing. Di Stefano fundamentally redefined the center-forward position. He functioned simultaneously as what we might call a defensive nine and a four-phase playmaker. He moved with purpose across the entire pitch.
Right.
He was rarely static, roaming from his own penalty area right up to the opposing goal mouth.
It sounds like he refused to be confined by any traditional positional label, even within the relatively free-flowing WM formation of the day. So how did he manage to control all 4 phases of play defense, transition offense, and attack from one central role?
He did it through unparalleled game intelligence and strategic awareness. Our sources highlight that he wasn't merely seeking the best immediate action, he was thinking several passes and defensive reactions ahead. He was playing chess while others were playing checkers. He had this ability to deliberately delay gaining space, using subtle stepovers or body positioning to bait defenders into a particular area. Or, conversely, he would impose these short breaks in the game.
This concept of controlling rhythm, of applying pausa not just as a winger like Copa did, but as the central pivot for the entire team. That's what made him unique.
Absolutely. He would often receive the ball deep in midfield, hold it, stop moving, and simply allow the entire play to reset itself. He'd let his teammates reorganize their positions before he would explosively revive the pace in varying degrees of intensity. Sir Bobby Charlton famously summed it up. He said, "The Argentine was the smartest player I ever saw. Di Stefano came onto the pitch, and the game had been largely played out in his head."
Wow. That deep dive into his tactical role really paints the complete picture of the total footballer. If we try to use modern comparisons to fully illustrate his unique skill set, what components are we looking at?
Well, he was a convergence of elite abilities. He possessed the spatial interpretation and the movement intelligence of a Thomas Müller, knowing exactly where to be and when to exploit pockets of space.
Okay.
He had the ruthless killer instinct for rebounds and finishes of a Gerd Müller.
Right, the poacher's instinct.
Exactly. And he combined that with the imposing physical and psychological commanding presence of a Karim Benzema, acting as the team's general who could drop into midfield to orchestrate everything. He was positionally complete, athletically dominant, and psychologically controlling all in one man. His final tally of 7 goals in the '57 tournament, coupled with winning 1957 Ballon d'Or, with Copa finishing third, that just confirms his individual zenith.
And the arrival of Raymond Copa, who they acquired from their rivals just the year before, only amplified that power, cementing that Galactico model.
The Copa Di Stefano synergy was terrifying for opponents because it offered so much variety. Copa, the master puppeteer, provided the precise technical vision and control. Gento provided the raw vertical speed. And Di Stefano was the general overseeing it all. This combination of vision, command, and frightening pace confirmed that the Galactico acquisition model that Real Madrid was perfecting was the future. Buy the best individual talent and use it to create overwhelming collective synergistic power.
And institutionally, this final was a massive milestone because of the tactical dialogue it established.
It was a clear, early collision between the emerging Spanish school focused on offensive brilliance and star-driven fluidity and the rising Italian school, which was focused on structural integrity and defensive discipline. The 1957 match set the tone for decades of continental football rivalry. Fiorentina's early defensive setup, particularly the use of that proto-libero in the tornante, was a crucial precursor and really a catalyst for the tactical refinement that would define the success of later Italian clubs like the great Milanese sides in the 1960s. The 1957 final showed the continent the 2 ways forward. So the deep dive into the 1957 European Cup final, it reveals it was far more than a routine 2-0 victory. It was the moment Real Madrid established the comprehensive template for the modern European superclub.
Right, structurally dominant, financially powerful.
Tactically advanced through the genius of Di Stefano and profoundly politically significant, acting as this global ambassador for a regime in isolation.
The final, played out in front of that staggering, unprecedented crowd of over 124,000, it really marked the true birth of the continental sports spectacle. It confirmed that this competition was not only indispensable, but that the stars of Madrid Di Stefano, Copa, and Gento were now collectively the universally recognized face of European sport.
Which leads us to a fascinating final thought that transcends the touchline and connects sport to history. Our sources emphasize how the widespread enthusiasm, the massive crowds, and the broad cultural penetration of the European Cup created a powerful, shared European emotional wiring.
So you have this new, vibrant, and shared continental football experience, built on spectacle and star power, linking people across newly forming political boundaries in a way that simply had never happened before.
So we ask you, the listener, to consider this historical connection. Did this new, vibrant, and shared continental football experience built on the glorious and often controversial dominance of Real Madrid ultimately contribute more to uniting the European public space in the 1950s, creating a collective, shared identity, than the complex, bureaucratic, and often cautious efforts of the emerging European economic community? It's something to ponder until our next deep dive.
It was the third edition of Europe's premier club competition, running from September 1957 all the way to May 1958.
And it feels like if the first two editions established the tournament's existence, this third one really established its scale and, tragically, its emotional weight.
It absolutely did. We saw a real surge in participation. I mean, it expanded to a record 24 teams from 23 different associations.
That expansion is so fascinating in itself. It really signals a continent starting to, knit itself back together, right? Who's finally joining the party.
Exactly. This season was truly pivotal for integrating the wider European sphere. We saw the first ever participation of clubs from three really crucial new regions. The Republic of Ireland, Northern Ireland, and East Germany.
Wow.
And if you just think about that for a moment, this competition, it's barely 3 years old, and it was already crossing these huge political and geographical divides.
Yeah, spanning the entire island of Ireland.
And pushing right up against the borders of the Cold War divide with the inclusion of East Germany's side. It just underscored that football, perhaps a bit more quickly than diplomacy, was becoming a unifying force across Europe.
Okay, so let's unpack that expanding context, because what was shaping up to be this celebration of pan-European ambition was just horribly and tragically marred by an event that still echoes today.
Right.
This season carries the immense weight of the Munich air disaster in February 1958.
That event is just central to understanding the emotional landscape of the tournament. Manchester United, the celebrated Busby Babes, were a phenomenal team.
So young, so dynamic.
Incredibly so. And they were heavily tipped to challenge the developing dominance of Real Madrid. They were tragically involved in the disaster on their way home from the quarterfinal second leg against Red Star Belgrade.
And the sources, they just convey this sense of profound shock and loss that just froze the entire football world.
It did. 8 of their young players died, along with staff and journalists. The disaster just cast this immense immediate shadow over the rest of the competition. For many, the idea of even carrying on seemed impossible.
I can't even imagine.
But the tournament, through incredible courage from the remaining United players and staff, it had to conclude. The sources from the time reveal an almost palpable feeling that the remaining matches were being played under this cloud of solemnity and reflection.
A gut-wrenching moment that defined the season off the pitch. But despite that tragedy, the climax of the tournament provided one of the most intense, high-stakes matches of the competition's young history.
Absolutely. The central conflict saw Real Madrid, the 2-time defending champions, face an incredibly formidable AC Milan side in the final. And Milan wasn't just another challenger. They were a tactical crucible really designed to test Madrid's very foundation.
And the result was a monumental 3-2 victory for Madrid in Brussels, securing their 3rd consecutive title. But the number that sticks out to me, reading the historical accounts, is that this wasn't a regulation time win.
And that's the key. What's fascinating here is that the victory came after extra time. This was the first European Cup final ever decided in that format.
The very first.
The first one. And that tells you everything you need to know. It wasn't a coronation like the previous two wins, which arguably had moments of relative ease. This was a survival test. It was the ultimate proving ground where Madrid were forced to push past the limits of 90 minutes against a side that just refused to break.
And that's our mission for you, the listener, today. We're going to use our source material reports, tactical analyses, and intimate club accounts to unpack the managerial changes, the tactical blueprints, and the minute-by-minute drama of a season that cemented Real Madrid's dynasty status in a way their previous two wins didn't.
So we're asking, what ingredients did they have to acquire and demonstrate to pass this survival test?
Let's get into it.
To understand the 1958 victory, we really have to start with the man who laid the psychological foundation for it, Luis Carniglia.
Yay.
Real Madrid had won the first two European Cups under Jose Villalonga, but the 1957-58 season saw this major shift at the top, which a lot of critics at the time viewed as a really risky change.
That is interesting. I mean, why change a winning formula? Why fix what isn't broken?
Well, the club leadership, and especially the visionary Santiago Bernabeu, they understood that just relying on flair and, chemistry wasn't going to guarantee long-term dominance.
They needed something more.
They needed to harden the team, ensuring that tactical discipline matched the incredible offensive talent they had. So Argentine manager Luis Carniglia replaced Villalonga in June 1957.
And he came with a good reputation.
A great one. Carniglia didn't arrive untested. He came with serious credentials, having just led OGC Nice to the French Ligue 1 title. The message from the board was clear. Maintain momentum, but inject new, stricter ideas.
And the sources paint Carniglia as almost the antithesis of that, white ballet mentality that defined the team's attack. What specifically defined his approach?
He was a fundamentally pragmatic coach, almost military in his outlook, especially when it came to conditioning. The sources highlight that his identity was just forged in strict discipline and intense physical conditioning, what we might now call maximizing marginal gains, even back then.
So his mission was to build a base.
Precisely. His mission was to solidify the defense, to provide this unshakable base for the legendary offensive core. Alfredo Di Stefano, Raymond Kopa, Paco Gento, and Hector Real. He believed talent alone was fragile, but talent plus discipline, that was invincible.
That sounds like a cultural clash just waiting to happen in a squad full of global superstars used to playing with, extreme freedom.
Oh, there had to be tension, but Carniglia's authority was absolute, and he used high-profile examples to establish it. The anecdote involving Ferenc Puskás perfectly illustrates this uncompromising stance.
Right, even though Puskás technically arrived midway through this European Cup season in 1958.
Correct. But the story is so telling.
It really is. I mean, this detail is often recounted, but let's go deep on it. Puskás was one of the greatest players in the world, having just fled Hungary. He arrives at Madrid, ready to join the best team on the planet, and is immediately told to sit down.
Benched? That's right. When Puskás arrived, he was significantly overweight. He'd been inactive following the Hungarian Revolution and his subsequent exile.
So he wasn't match fit.
Not even close. Carniglia looked at him, this global superstar, and famously refused to play him. He laid down an ultimatum. Puskás must lose 15 kilograms.
15? That's a lot.
It's a huge amount. And this wasn't just a fitness demand. It was a statement to the entire locker room that no one, not even a legend who hadn't kicked a ball for the club yet, was above the manager's rules.
And the psychological impact of that must have been massive.
Oh, for sure. Seeing Puskás, a global idol, running laps and adhering to a strict diet, that surely set the tone for the entire squad's commitment to physical superiority.
So that uncompromising discipline focused on condition is really the hidden element we have to remember when we discuss that extra time win in Brussels later. They were physically prepared for war.
Precisely. And Carniglia wasn't just relying on discipline. He brought in two absolutely critical pieces of personnel to execute his defensive vision.
The first, and you could argue the most important, was Jose Emilio Santamaria.
Santamaria was the centerpiece. This Uruguayan defender, signed from Nacional de Montevideo, was just a colossal figure, both physically and reputationally. He'd started in the 1954 World Cup.
A real statement signing.
A huge one. His arrival provided the powerful, intellectual, central defensive foundation the team desperately needed. Before Santamaria, Madrid's defense sometimes had to rely on attacking flair to cover their vulnerabilities. With him, they had a rock.
Which freed up the attackers.
Completely. His presence meant the attacking core Di Stefano, Kopa, Gento could roam with far greater license, knowing their backline was almost impenetrable.
And the sources note that securing a new goalkeeper was also high on Carneglia's list.
Absolutely. They secured Rogelio Dominguez, an Argentine goalkeeper who was fresh off winning the 1957 Copa America with his national team.
So they're pulling the best from South America.
Exactly. This showed Bernabeu and Carnegie were thinking continentally, poaching the best defensive talent from the South American powerhouses. Dominguez was a commanding presence, supplementing Santa Maria's leadership. The overall message of that summer transfer window was clear. The White Ballet is now wearing steel boots.
And Santa Maria's arrival really signaled a fundamental tactical and cultural shift. It showed Madrid wasn't just relying on star forwards, but building a structurally complete, balanced European side. So how did this defensive overhaul translate into domestic success?
It was an immediate triumph. Madrid clinched their 6th Spanish League La Liga title that season, and the key takeaway from the domestic campaign was defensive efficiency. They conceded only 26 goals across 30 matches. That's a testament to the Carneglia regime immediately stamping its mark.
But despite this renewed defensive focus, the attacking stars weren't stifled at all.
Far from it. Di Stefano was still the engine, operating with characteristic dominance up front. He clinched yet another league top scorer trophy, the famous Pichichi, with 19 goals. This balance, marrying a watertight defense with an unstoppable attack, just made them domestically terrifying.
So European dominance established, domestic championship secured. That automatically turns the conversation to the ultimate prize that eluded them, the continental treble.
And the sources highlight this as a period of just profound ambition. The dream of becoming the first team in the world to win the Continental Treble League, Cup, and European Cup was agonizingly close that year, but ultimately dashed.
Right. They reached the final of the Copa del Generalissimo, the Spanish Cup.
But lost 2-0 to Athletic Bilbao.
And that loss carries a specific weight, doesn't it? It's not just that they lost.
It was a particularly bitter pill for the club because they lost the final while playing at home at their own stadium, the Bernabeu.
Oh, that's brutal.
The defeat was crushing, and it continued what was becoming this unfortunate trend for Real Madrid, a series of close calls in the Copa finals. This domestic failure meant the pressure on winning the European Cup became almost unbearable. The dream of the treble was over. Now Europe was everything.
So the campaign wasn't just about maintaining a dynasty anymore.
No, it was about salvaging the season's entire reputation.
That Copa defeat, playing at home, must have just ratcheted up the psychological stakes on the European campaign. Looking at Madrid's path to the final, the sources highlight this really clear cyclical pattern.
They do.
Absolute untouchable dominance at home, contrasted with moments of real struggle and vulnerability away.
It's the perfect illustration of their transition under Carneglia. He fortified the defense and physical strength, which made them untouchable in familiar surroundings. But the old anxieties of away fixtures, especially against unfamiliar tactical setups, they persisted. The sources often call this their two-faces tie phenomenon.
So let's track that cycle, starting with the first round against Royal Antwerp of Belgium.
They secured an 8-1 aggregate victory, which on paper sounds like total domination.
Right, a blowout.
But the pattern was absolutely visible. They had a narrow, really tense 2-1 win away in Antwerp. They struggled, showing those early signs of vulnerability. Then they came back home and delivered a crushing 6-0 victory in Madrid.
So it set the tone immediately.
It set the immutable tone. At the Santiago Bernabéu, Madrid were an unstoppable force of nature. And you can see this in the fact that they didn't concede a single goal in Europe that year at home. Not one.
Not a single goal at home all tournament. That's incredible. Then came a tie that was historically significant and, frankly, terrifying for the opposition. The quarterfinal against their domestic rival, Sevilla.
This was a landmark moment for the competition itself. It was the first time two clubs from the same nation met in the European Cup. It generated massive media interest, a continental derby, and that first leg was immortalized as just a truly legendary display of destruction.
The scoreline was 8-0.
8-0 at home. Real Madrid demolished Sevilla.
8-0, that's a scoreline you usually see in a warm-up match against a vastly inferior team, not a European quarterfinal against a major Spanish rival.
It was overwhelming on every single level. Club media and contemporary reports described it as a legendary display of destruction, and it remains one of the biggest scorelines in European knockout history.
So what was happening tactically? Was it just a freak result?
Not at all. It was an exhibition of Di Stefano's genius within that fluid WM formation. Di Stefano, Copa, and Gento simply ran riot, constantly swapping positions, pulling Sevilla's defense completely out of shape. Di Stefano was the key architect, scoring 4 goals himself.
4 goals.
It immediately became this central pillar of Madrid's European mythology. It proved they could destroy domestic rivals on the continental stage with a swagger that suggested they were just entitled to the trophy.
But, true to the pattern, the second leg in Seville, with the tie already decided, it settled into a much more controlled and slightly vulnerable 2-2 draw.
Correct. Madrid advanced 10-2 overall, so it was a foregone conclusion, but the away leg showed them settling, maybe relaxing a bit, and conceding 2 goals. The real test of character, though, and the next illustration of that persistent vulnerability abroad, came in the semifinal.
Against Vasas SC of Hungary.
Exactly.
And this would have been hugely intimidating because the Hungarian side would have carried that immense prestige from the great national team of the early to mid-50s, the magical Magyars.
Exactly. The team that destroyed England reached the World Cup final. Their style was deeply influenced by that legendary, technically sophisticated 1950-56 national side.
So following the pattern, Madrid crushed them at home.
Once again, Madrid dominated the first leg, winning 4-0 in front of an immense crowd, reportedly 120,000 spectators packed into the Bernabeu.
And Di Stefano's brilliance was on full display again.
He was sublime. He scored an iconic hat-trick, cementing his status as the definitive European player of the era. If you look at Madrid's historical media, they frequently use the image of him leaping to celebrate one of those goals as symbolizing the origin to ADN European.
It means
The origin of the European DNA. The club sees that performance as the moment the spirit of European dominance was truly born.
But the return leg in Budapest at the NEP Stadion was anything but easy.
It was 90 minutes of maximum anxiety for the traveling Spanish support. The Hungarian technical ability was just suffocating. Madrid lost 2-0.
So they got through.
They survived, advancing 4-2 on aggregate. But it demonstrated once again how Madrid could genuinely suffer away from home, particularly against high-caliber Eastern European opposition, playing with real tactical sophistication. It was a serious warning sign that they were beatable.
I love that small historical detail the sources include about that trip to Budapest, that the Madrid players witnessed an early piece of sporting technology.
Yes. It connects this football history to the era's massive post-war technological surge. The Madrid players, visiting the NEP Stadion, saw what was described as one of the world's first large electronic scoreboards.
That's a great detail.
This tiny detail places the whole event firmly in the context of Expo 58, which we'll discuss later, a time when Europe was just rushing toward the future.
So we have a Madrid side that is defensively fortified, capable of absolute demolition at home, but occasionally susceptible to pressure and technical play on the road. They're physically prepared, but maybe psychologically scarred from the loss of the treble and that stressful away leg in Hungary.
Exactly. And now we have to turn our attention to the tactical headache waiting for them in Brussels.
AC Milan.
AC Milan arrived in Brussels carrying the weight of Italian football ambition, but they were also a club in deep tactical evolution. Their prior successes in the early 1950s had been defined by the legendary Swedish Green-Nolly trio.
Gunnar Gren, Gunnar Nordahl, and Nils Lidholm.
A monument to pure offensive force.
But by 1958, that legendary trio was almost broken up. Nordahl had left, Gren was gone, and only Nils Lidholm remained, meaning Milan had to find a completely new identity beyond just pure flair.
That's right. Lidholm remained as the team captain and the tactical anchor, but Milan was transitioning from pure offensive flair to something much more disciplined and strategically challenging, thanks largely to their coach, Giuseppe Viani.
And Viani is a fascinating figure in the evolution of defensive football.
A man ahead of his time.
We have sources describing him as a pioneer of defensive football, who certainly influenced the later, more famous Catenaccio system that would define Italian football a few years later.
His contribution was massive and foundational. Viani's key innovation involved the concept of the verrou,
Which translates to what?
roughly the bolt or the lock, and it introduced the concept of the sweeper. The sources offer this wonderful, almost poetic origin story for this.
Tell me the story. I love these deep dive nuggets.
Okay, so the story goes that Viani, while working as a coach in Salerno, was inspired by watching local fishing boats. They would deploy a large main net, but they also used a smaller backup net placed slightly behind the main one to catch any fish that managed to escape the first trap.
Wait, from a fishing net? Seriously?
That's the story. He transposed this idea directly onto the pitch.
A fishing net as the inspiration for one of the world's first systematic defensive tactics. That's brilliant.
It is. He positioned a player, the libero or sweeper, behind the main defensive line. This player was Cesar Maldini in the final lineup.
The father of Paolo Maldini.
The very same. The libero wasn't there to mark an opponent, but to provide that backup net, intercepting any attacker who broke through the back four. It allowed the fullbacks and central defenders to be more aggressive in their marking because they knew Maldini was there to cover the space.
So Milan played in this highly disciplined, counter-attacking 1-3-3-3 structure.
Exactly. Designed specifically to frustrate the fluidity of a side like Madrid.
That's a phenomenal image using fishing technology to invent tactical architecture. So Milan wasn't just relying on tough defense, they were using systemic defense to absorb pressure and launch attacks. What about the talent tasked with launching those attacks?
They had a brilliant multinational core designed for precision strikes. First, you have Nils Lidholm, Il Baron, the Swedish captain and elegant playmaker. He was renowned for his vision and his almost surgical passing range.
And the sources mention his slow passing game. What does that mean exactly in terms of tactics?
It was a conscious, patient style. Lidholm rarely rushed a pass or undertook risky individual dribbles. He dictated the tempo, often using short, accurate passes to shift the opposing defense incrementally, moving them out of position until a clear seam emerged.
That's the foundation for his later coaching tactic.
The famous spider's web, a strategy based on geometrically perfect, patient ball movement designed to eventually trap the opponent. He was the intellectual heart of the team.
And the South American influence was just as strong on the Italian side as it was on Madrid's.
Very strong. They had Juan Alberto Schifino, the Uruguayan-Italian inside forward, famous as a hero of the 1950 World Cup final for Uruguay. He was known for his unerring positional sense, always finding space between the lines.
And an Argentine as well.
Ernesto Grillo, the technically gifted Argentine forward. This blend of Italian strategic steel, Swedish patient elegance, and South American flair made them a truly unique and potent challenge to Madrid's dynasty.
And Milan's journey to the finals certainly tested their resilience much more than Madrid's relative ease until the semifinals. It shows they knew how to suffer before they even arrived in Brussels.
Oh, Milan's path was grueling and characterized by drama. In the preliminary round, they faced Rapid Wien and played out this chaotic 6-6 aggregate draw.
6-6.
It forced a tense replay in Zurich, which Milan eventually won 4-2. They showed firepower with high-scoring wins over Rangers and Borussia Dortmund. They were a high-stakes, resilient team.
But the semi-final tie against the depleted Manchester United side carried the deepest emotional weight of the entire tournament, casting this immense psychological shadow over Milan's victory.
Without a doubt, Milan faced the remnants of the Busby Babes playing in the immediate aftermath of the horrific Munich disaster. The media coverage was intense, balancing journalistic duty with profound respect and sympathy for the English side.
And United actually won the first leg.
They did. Despite the emotional challenge and the makeshift lineup, United managed a courageous 2-1 win at Old Trafford. It was a victory for the human spirit more than tactical superiority.
But Milan's experience and quality ultimately showed in the second leg.
Yes, they had to be ruthless. In the second leg at the San Siro, Milan overwhelmed the diminished English side with a decisive 4-0 home victory, advancing 5-2 on aggregate.
So they earned their place?
They did. They had faced the unique pressure of playing the emotional favorite in a situation nobody wanted to be in. Their win proved their durability and mental fortitude, and they arrived in Brussels with the knowledge that they had overcome immense hurdles and deep international sentiment.
So the stage was magnificently set for the final on Wednesday, May 28, 1958.
The match took place at the Heysel Stadium in Brussels, Belgium, with 67,000 spectators. And the sources emphasized that this wasn't just a match, it was a grand European event, intertwined with a massive cultural moment.
You mentioned the context of the Brussels World Exposition, Expo 58. It's crucial to link the match to that atmosphere of futurism and rebuilding.
It was absolutely critical. The entire city of Brussels was a showcase of scientific progress, architectural ambition, and technological wonder. The symbol of the exposition was the atomium.
That massive, iconic structure.
Representing an iron crystal unit cell magnified 165 billion times. The media consciously positioned the football final, contested by two teams using players from across Europe and South America, as a parallel symbol of modernizing, globalized, post-war Europe.
A clash of titans in a new era.
Exactly. And the tactical battle mirrored that idea of innovation. You had Real Madrid's fluid WM formation, reliant on Di Stefano's freedom and movement, going up against Milan's highly disciplined, counter-attacking 1-3-3-3 structure, rooted in Vianney's revolutionary Vero concept.
The contrast couldn't have been starker.
Madrid relied entirely on the constant motion and omnipresence of Di Stefano. He was the false nine, the playmaker, the finisher. He dropped deep to orchestrate, attack the wings, and always positioned himself perfectly to exploit gaps.
And Milan's strategy.
With Cicciotto Maldini anchoring as the deep libero, it was designed to counter exactly that kind of freedom. They aimed to shut down the central channel and force Madrid to commit errors.
The possession statistics tell the story of the tactile dominance Milan had to overcome, right?
Yes. Despite Milan's strategic defense, Madrid held an estimated 75% of the ball. This just demonstrates the relentless pressure Vianney's system was under. Milan knew they would lose the ball battle, so their entire game plan revolved around precision, structure, and devastating counterattacks once Madrid was caught overcommitted.
And the first half was an intense tactical stalemate. It ended goalless, which suggests Milan's defensive blueprint was working perfectly to neutralize Madrid's early possession game and frustrate their rhythm.
Vianney was winning the tactical battle initially. Madrid looked frustrated, relying on long shots, struggling to break through that Maldini-anchored line. But in the second half, the physical conditioning Carneglia had imposed and the mental refusal to lose started to take over.
The match shifted from a tactical chess game to a whirlwind of goals. The famous second-half duel began in the 59th minute.
Milan drew first blood. It was a beautiful example of their counterattacking precision. Juan Alberto Schiaffino, the Uruguayan playmaker, received the ball, and with that unerring positional sense he was famous for, blasted the ball into the net.
So it's 1-0 to Milan.
1-0 Milan. And for the first time, Madrid's dynasty was staring at the real possibility of failure. The mood in the stadium must have swung wildly.
The champions had to react, and they reacted instantly, thanks to their talisman.
Absolutely. The clock was ticking, the psychological weight was immense. In the 74th minute, Alfredo Di Stefano took matters into his own hands. He received the ball, and with typical ferocity, drove a fierce right-footed shot past the Milan keeper.
1-1.
And the importance of that goal cannot be overstated. It maintained his incredible, untouchable record of scoring in every single European Cup final he played in. A true mark of a player built for the biggest stage.
That equalizer should have broken Milan's spirit, but their response was immediate and absolutely stunning, showing their own deep reserve of character.
It was a gut punch to Madrid. Just 3 minutes later, in the 77th minute, Milan launched another devastating counter. The Argentine, Ernesto Grillo, restored Milan's lead. 2-1.
Oh, wow.
For the first time in the history of the competition, this dynasty Real Madrid found itself not just behind, but twice staring down the barrel of defeat in a European final. The sense of panic in the Spanish contingent must have been overwhelming.
That's maximum suffering compressed into 2 minutes. Trailing 2-1 with just 10 minutes left, the pressure must have been unbearable.
This is where the narrative shifts from tactical chess to a raw test of character, and this is why Carneglia's discipline mattered so much. The resilience that defines legendary teams kicked in. Only 2 minutes after Grillo's goal, in the 79th minute, Hector Real leveled the score again.
How did he score?
He hit a wonderful lob shot following a pass from Zarga, exploiting a momentary lapse in Milan's concentration. 2-2.
4 goals in 20 minutes. It was a frantic, historic trading of blows. But the drama wasn't over at 2-2.
Not at all. Milan still had a massive opportunity to clinch the title in regulation time. In the dying moments of the 90 minutes, Nils Lidholm, the elegant architect, hit the crossbar.
No way.
An agonizing near-miss moment, a fraction lower, and Milan wins their first title, defeating the great Real Madrid. But the ball stayed out, the whistle blew, and history was achieved. The first European Cup final ever forced into extra time.
And this is the moment Carneglia's emphasis on physical conditioning paid off, turning the match into the true survival test you mentioned earlier.
The sources agree completely. Extra time is as much mental as it is physical, and Madrid's superior conditioning was clearly noted. The incredible intensity of that 20-minute goal flurry favored the team with deeper stamina. They had been prepared to run for 120 minutes if necessary. The intensity was now a contest of attrition.
And in the 107th minute, the moment arrived. The Gento moment, sealed by a prophecy.
Paco Gento, the man who was often described as the fastest man in Europe, allegedly clocked at running 100 meters in around 11 seconds in his prime, scored the winner. This goal was born out of sheer physical dominance and speed.
And what was the prophecy?
Di Stefano, recognizing the need for raw pace to beat the tiring Milan defense, had reportedly told Gento beforehand, "Only you can win this game with one of your runs."
A perfect prediction. He broke through the tired lines of the Veru defense.
Gento broke down the left wing, found the space opened up by the sheer volume of attacks, and fired a low, decisive left-footed shot. 3-2. The goal was beautiful in its simplicity and its execution, coming at a time when legs were heavy and minds were exhausted.
But the sources stress that Gento's strike only secured the lead. The true ceiling of the trophy relied on the man at the other end of the pitch.
Absolutely. Rogelio Dominguez, Milan, desperate, threw everything forward in the final minutes of extra time. Goalkeeper Juan Alonso, who had been solid throughout, made several crucial late saves to prevent another Milan equalizer. He held firm against the final assault, and the match concluded 3-2.
Real Madrid had endured the ultimate test of resilience.
And King Albert II of Belgium presented the medals, officially recognizing Madrid's third consecutive and perhaps most difficult European title.
This dramatic victory didn't just add a trophy, it instantly reshaped the legacies of several key figures. Paco Gento, the match winner, had previously been slightly overshadowed by the megastars like Di Stefano and Copa. This win cemented his own legendary status as the clutch player.
Gento's longevity and consistency are just remarkable, and this victory truly put him on the map as an indispensable member of the team. He became the first player ever to score in consecutive European Cup finals for Real Madrid, scoring in both 1957 and 1958.
It really highlighted his unique attributes.
That blistering speed and devastating left foot, they were often the difference maker in the biggest, tightest games.
It speaks volumes about the level of trust his teammates placed in him. Di Stefano, the generational talent, essentially outsourced the winning moment to Gento.
That prediction, "Only you can win this game with one of your runs," is the ultimate testimonial to Gento's reliability. He was the reliable, consistent force during that early golden era. His role was less about orchestration and more about execution at the highest speed, and he delivered when the technical brilliance of others was neutralized by Vianney's defense.
An incredible career in the end.
He eventually played in 8 finals, winning 6, making him the most decorated player in the competition's history at the time of his retirement.
And what of the two managers who delivered this incredible, high-stakes final? Luis Carniglia secured the Continental Double La Liga and the European Cup. But his tenure didn't last long, despite the success.
Carniglia's tenure at Real Madrid was immensely successful, but politically fraught. He won 2 European Cups, this one in 1958 and the next in 1959, and a league title. However, the sources note that internal friction with the hierarchy, and especially with Chairman Santiago Bernabeu, was intense and constant.
It was a clash of styles.
Completely. Carniglia's strict, pragmatic style clashed with Bernabeu's preference for flamboyant football and accommodating his biggest stars.
So his dismissal wasn't due to poor results, but a difference in management philosophy.
Precisely. The sources point to the final straw, though it happened in the following season. Carniglia's decision to leave an aging Puskás out of the 1959 final lineup against Stade de Reims. That was seen as an unacceptable slight against a favorite of the chairman, leading directly to Carniglia's sacking despite winning the trophy.
Wow, he won 2 European Cups in 2 years and still lost his job.
A perfect illustration of the political complexity at the Bernabeu.
He didn't vanish, though. He took his expertise elsewhere, including, ironically, to the team he had just beaten.
Far from it. Carniglia had a wide-ranging managerial career afterwards, demonstrating his ideas were portable and successful. He managed several Italian clubs and went on to win the Intercities Ferris Cup with Roma in 1961. And yes, in an incredible twist of fate, he even managed AC Milan in 1963-64, the very team he had overcome in that grueling Brussels final.
And Giuseppe Vianney, despite the defeat, earned massive respect for his tactical blueprint, setting the tone for Italian football dominance in the 1960s.
Vianney's ideas were validated by the sheer difficulty Madrid had in beating them. His captain, Nils Liedholm, went on to have a massively successful managerial career himself, winning titles with both Milan and Roma.
And he took Vianney's ideas forward.
Absolutely. Liedholm's management style, heavily influenced by Vianney, saw him implement innovative concepts like zonal marking and highly fluid positioning, that geometrical passing system he called the spider's web. He took the technical patience of his playing days and turned it into a coaching structure.
And Liedholm offered a fascinating critique of the game itself after the final, which says a lot about the tactical evolution happening in the late 50s.
He did. Liedholm, despite the agony of the loss, pointed out a crucial philosophical difference in the game at the time, observing that it had become too easy to stop by fouling.
An interesting point.
It highlighted his commitment to clean, technical play and suggested that defensive, cynical tactics were starting to take hold of trend. Vianney's Veru was trying to master, but which Madrid's relentless physical conditioning ultimately overcame.
So when we look back at the 1958 victory, what does it tell us about Real Madrid as a club that the slightly easier 1956 and 1957 titles didn't? What was the definitive takeaway?
The sources are overwhelmingly clear. The 1958 title is often described as Real Madrid's first true survival European Cup. The narrative arc of the season moved from the incredible psychological burden of losing the domestic treble and facing the Munich tragedy to moments of absolute domination.
Destroying Sevilla 8-0.
And then to moments of maximum suffering, losing 2-0 away to Vasas and then being twice behind against an elite Milan side in the final.
So it wasn't just another trophy, it was the ultimate proof of their character.
It proved their comeback DNA was already ingrained. The final was a brutal collision of cultural and tactical ideologies, the fluid, attacking white ballet versus the disciplined, emerging Italian defensive strategy. Madrid had the mental fortitude and the physical superiority, honed by Corniglia, to endure 120 minutes of stress and fatigue. It wasn't an easy coronation. It was a hard-fought validation of their status as the world's most resilient team.
It feels like a pivotal moment in football history.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the 1958 final cemented several key elements of the emerging global football landscape. It validated the necessity of relentless mental and physical superiority, even for a dynasty like Real Madrid, especially when facing new tactical systems like the Veru.
And it was a truly international final.
More importantly, yes, it solidified the truly international nature of elite club football. The winner was decided by goals from the Argentine Di Stefano and the Spaniard Gento, but the quality was provided by the Uruguayan Santa Maria, the Swedish Lidholm, and the Argentine Grito. Knowledge, tactics, and talent were mobile, making the European Cup the ultimate global proving ground.
That intersection of global talent and tactical evolution is what makes this era so compelling, and why this particular final feels so weighty. Before we sign off, I want to return to that legendary quote associated with the final. After the 1958 match, the defeated Milan captain Nils Lidholm showed incredible grace by telling Alfredo Di Stefano, "Keep the shirt. That won't matter. The only thing that will be remembered from this match down the years is that Real Madrid won."
A graceful but incredibly sharp statement that cuts right to the heart of elite competition.
It does. And this raises the final important question for you, the listener, to consider. Does the dramatic, come-from-behind nature of the 1958 final, requiring extra time and immense fortitude against a master defensive strategist like Vianney, actually make this victory more meaningful than the previous two for solidifying Real Madrid's status as the true architects of European football history? Was enduring this survival test against tactical innovation the final non-negotiable ingredient in their legendary status?
Something to think about.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the epic, dramatic, and ultimately history-defining 1957-58 European Cup. We'll see you next time. Our mission today, really, is to figure out two key things for you. First, how on earth did this dynasty not only survive that extreme turmoil?
Yeah, how do they hold it together?
I mean, specifically the dramatic arrival of a legendary player, Puskas, who was, nearly 20 kilograms overweight?
Unbelievable, yeah.
And all the skepticism around his age. But then, second, and this is maybe the crazier part,
Might be.
why the very manager who delivered the trophy, Luis Carniglia, was just unceremoniously sacked, moments after the final whistle. The logic seems completely inverted.
It does, and we really need to understand the institutional calculus behind that decision.
And this is the core contradiction we absolutely have to grapple with.
It is. They secured ultimate continental glory. Right. They cemented their status by winning the European Cup for the fourth time in a row against Stade Reims.
The ultimate prize.
Yet at the same time, they experienced undeniable domestic failure. They were runners-up in La Liga, finishing 4 points behind Barcelona.
Crashed out of the cup.
Crashed out in the Copa del Rey semifinals. And guess who beat them?
Barcelona.
Barcelona again. So they won Europe, but they lost Spain. And the man responsible for that European success gets dismissed immediately.
Yeah.
It sets up this perfect dynamic of extreme pressure and these non-negotiable standards that we'll just see repeated throughout the club's history.
Okay, so let's set the context for this dynasty. When the 1958-59 season begins, Real Madrid isn't just a great team. They are the undisputed European hegemony.
Oh, without a doubt. They're the three-time defending champions entering the fourth edition of the European Cup, a competition they basically invented and, certainly dominated from day one.
It was their competition.
It really was.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that dominance came with a structural advantage at this time.
How so?
Because they were the title holders. The tournament structure gave them a bye through the preliminary round.
Ah, okay. That's a huge help.
It's massive. What it meant practically was that while other clubs were already exhausting themselves in early European qualifiers, Madrid could focus entirely on internal matters.
Like squad integration, fitness.
Exactly. Resting key players and, critically, the unique and intense physical conditioning necessary for the long domestic season and those high-pressure knockout stages to come. This period of focus was absolutely vital.
Why vital?
Because manager Luis Carniglia had a massive and highly controversial new signing he needed to integrate into the world's most successful team.
And that takes us straight to the Hungarian enigma, Ferenc Puskás. This transfer is, to this day, one of the most remarkable and frankly improbable signings in football history.
It really is.
You mentioned controversy, but for you, our listeners, why exactly was the arrival of a player of Puskás' technical stature, a true genius, so incredibly contentious both inside and outside the club?
Well, it was contentious because it wasn't just a simple football transfer. It was a geopolitical and a physical gamble of the highest order. And it was driven purely by one man, President Santiago Bernabéu.
It was his project.
It was his personal project. Puskás arrived in the summer of 1958 at the age of 31. Now, in that era, that was an age when players were considered well past their peak, especially forwards who rely on a bit of speed.
Oh, sure.
But the larger hurdle was the 2 years he'd spent under a strict FIFA ban. This was after his defection from communist Hungary, following the failed 1956 revolution.
So he hadn't played top-level football for 2 years.
Not a single competitive top-flight match in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that lack of play, combined with the obvious stress of being in exile, led to these profound physical doubts that just plagued him.
And the sources confirm this wasn't just Madrid gambling on an aging star. Other huge clubs, wealthy Italian clubs like Juventus and Milan, they had explicitly and officially rejected Puskás.
They had. They'd done their due diligence, and they decided the risk was just too high.
They looked at him and said, no, thank you.
Exactly. They saw a great player, a legend, of course.
Yeah.
But they also saw the physical reality. He was, to put it mildly, in disastrous shape. The phrase allegedly overweight that you see in the sources is truly an understatement.
So how bad was it, really?
The folklore surrounding his arrival is it's captured beautifully. Puskás himself reportedly lamented, "I'm too fat, I can't possibly play."
He said it himself.
He said, "I was the size of a large balloon." Estimates from the club staff put him at between 15 and 18 kilograms overweight upon his arrival in Madrid.
15 to 18 kilos, that's what, nearly 40 pounds? And a professional athlete.
It's just ruinous.
Yeah.
When you look at the physique of players in the 1950s, that amount of excess weight was considered utterly career-ending. There was no coming back from that.
And this is what leads to that legendary culture-defining confrontation between the manager, Luis Carniglia, and the president, Santiago Bernabéu. Carniglia, the reigning European Cup winning manager, he essentially confronted the president with the unvarnished reality of the situation. He basically said, what am I supposed to do with this guy?
He did. The manager, a pragmatic winner,
Yeah.
he questioned what he's supposed to do with a man who needed to lose almost 40 pounds just to be able to run for 90 minutes.
Right. How do you integrate that liability?
How do you integrate this physical liability into a team that's already winning everything? Bernabéu's response, according to Puskás' own recollection and club historians, was absolutely definitive. It was brutal.
And it set the standard, really.
It set the standard for the club's high-stakes, ruthless philosophy that persists to this day. He just said, "That's not my problem, that's yours. Get him fit."
Wow. Just like that.
Just like that.
That single quote seems to encapsulate Bernabéu's entire management philosophy. It's not about pragmatism or what's technically possible.
Oh.
It's about the institutional mandate. You bought a superstar for the propaganda value, and now the manager is responsible for making that propaganda functional on the pitch.
Precisely. It was an ultimate mandate. It was a test of Carniglia's authority and his ingenuity. The president had secured this political and public relations coup by signing the iconic captain of the Hungarian Golden Team.
The magical Magyars?
The manager's job was simple: turn that symbol into a functional footballing asset, or suffer the consequences.
And this brings us to the folklore of his fitness regimen, because the conditioning he underwent just to make his debut later that fall is, well, it's almost unimaginable now.
Oh, it's brutal.
We are talking about extreme measures that, I mean, they border on punishment. They were entirely necessary just to strip off that 15 kilograms he needed to lose before the season really got going.
The sources describe it so vividly.
Yeah.
Puskás training during the brutal Madrid August heat.
And Madrid in August is no joke.
No, we're talking about temperatures routinely soaring above 35 degrees Celsius. That's over 95 Fahrenheit. And Puskás wasn't just, going for a light jog.
What was he doing?
He was wrapped tightly in plastic sheeting, which he wore under several layers of heavy sweaters and tracksuits.
Oh, my goodness.
This extreme practice was intended to accelerate water weight and fat loss through this intense and, frankly, medically risky perspiration. This wasn't sophisticated sports science. This was brute force willpower and institutional pressure.
And he did it.
He suffered through that regimen for weeks. And the fact that he lost the necessary weight and debuted later that fall is a testament both to his staggering personal dedication and, well, the severity of the club's demand.
So the club successfully institutionalized the genius. And once he was match fit, the question then became, how do you integrate him alongside the greatest player in the world at the time, Alfredo Di Stefano?
Right.
And they didn't just play together. They formed what many sources still consider the most prolific and dominant forward partnership in the history of the sport.
And they were instantly lethal. I mean, right away.
Yeah.
Because they found a structural and a psychological balance that just clicked.
Di Stefano was the king.
He was already the established star of the Blonde Arrow. He was the conductor, the heart, the soul of the team. And crucially, Di Stefano operated in this unique, almost individualistic version of what we would now call total football.
So the sources claim Di Stefano essentially pioneered that deep-lying forward role that season. But wasn't that a massive risk? You're forcing the team's best goal scorer into duties that ranged across the entire field.
It was a risk, yeah.
How did Carneglia balance that without undermining the entire attack?
That's the key tactical nuance we have to understand. In 1958, traditional football relied so heavily on fixed positions. Strikers stayed strikers. Midfielders stayed midfielders. Di Stefano just defined this.
He was a true number 9, and 10 rolled into 1.
The prototype. He wasn't glued to the striker spot. He was fluid, constantly dropping deep into midfield, sometimes even helping out in defense to win the ball back.
And then what?
Only to then initiate the attack himself and surge forward again to finish the very move he started. This movement was revolutionary. It created absolute chaos for opponents' static defenses.
They just didn't know how to handle him.
Not at all. They didn't know whether to follow him, which would pull their center backs way out of position, or let him roam free, which allowed him to just dictate the entire game from deep.
And this incredible flexibility is what made Puskás the perfect complement.
Absolutely perfect. Puskás, the new arrival, he served as a pure, unadulterated inside left and out-and-out goal scorer. His genius lay in that left foot and his precision finishing.
He was happy to let Di Stefano run the show.
He was content to see the organizational and playmaking duties, all the running, the dictating to Di Stefano. While Di Stefano was the conductor, Puskás was the deadly instrument of execution.
And the numbers back that up, don't they?
They do. He was second in the league scoring charts that season with 21 goals, right behind Di Stefano's 23. This non-competitive complementary structure is why the partnership not only functioned immediately, but lasted for 6 devastating seasons.
It's the ultimate example of 2 immense individual egos finding harmony in service of one major shared objective: relentlessly scoring goals. But while that machine was being assembled and tested on the continent, domestically, things were, well, they were far from cohesive. Let's pivot to the Spanish landscape, because Real Madrid's dominance was truly and painfully dented by their fiercest rivals, CF Barcelona.
The pain was acute. It really was, both in La Liga and in the Copa del Generalissimo. In the Primera Division, Madrid finished in a respectable, but for them, and ultimately disappointing, second place.
And they were a few points behind.
4 points behind the champions, CF Barcelona. And this wasn't a failure of attack, quite the opposite. Madrid scored an astonishing club record of 89 goals during that league season.
89 goals. That's a phenomenal achievement in that era.
It is. That tells you the power of that Puskás-Di Stefano axis.
Yeah.
Yet they still couldn't catch Barcelona.
Who scored even more, I believe.
They did. Barcelona managed to net 96 goals themselves. The head-to-head results against Barca, really explain where the domestic title slipped away, specifically that crushing defeat early in the season that just set a terrible tone.
Tell us about that.
The sources confirmed the massive struggle they had against the eventual champions. In October 1958, Real Madrid suffered a painful and psychologically damaging 4-0 loss away to Barcelona at the Camp Nou.
A 4-0 thrashing.
A real shockwave. Tactical analyses from the time suggest that Barcelona, under the legendary Helenio Herrera, specifically targeted the spaces that were created by Di Stefano's deep runs.
Ah, so they exploited his movement.
They launched quick counterattacks that exposed Madrid's central defense. The sources note that the 4-0 loss led to immediate internal finger-pointing and rising tensions in the Bernabeu offices.
But they did manage to get some revenge later in the season.
Yes, they secured a crucial 1-0 home victory against Barcelona in February of 1959, which momentarily stabilized things. But the early damage, that 4-point gap, it was just too significant to overturn in the final standings.
So it showed a vulnerability.
It showed that while Madrid had all this offensive firepower, they were defensively vulnerable and maybe a bit tactically predictable to their main domestic rivals that year.
And the domestic struggles weren't just confined to the league table. The Copa del Generalissimo exit further underlined Barcelona's decisive edge that specific season.
Exactly. Madrid reached the semifinals of the Copa del Generalissimo, a trophy named after Francisco Franco at the time, which just underscores the political intensity of domestic football.
Of course.
Only to be defeated and eliminated, once again, by Barcelona.
So Barcelona did the double over them, in a sense.
They did. Barcelona secured the league and eliminated Madrid from the Cup, clearly holding the upper hand in the battles closer to home during that 58-59 campaign. And this domestic failure was a significant factor in the rising managerial pressure on Carniglia.
And this whole pressure cooker atmosphere, stoked by Barcelona's success, it seems to have contributed to some visible instability in the dugout. This was not a smooth managerial tenure for Luis Carniglia, even before the drama after the European final.
Not at all. It was highly unstable, and the timing of the instability is really key. Carniglia was actually temporarily replaced mid-season.
Which is almost unheard of for a reigning European champion manager.
Right. In February 1959, just as the league race was tightening and the European quarterfinals were approaching, Carniglia had to step away entirely.
What happened?
He had a severe case of renal colic, a very painful kidney issue.
So who stepped in to manage the team during that critical period?
Miguel Muñoz, the former club captain who had only just retired in 1958. He stepped in as interim manager until Carniglia was able to return in April.
And that interruption was crucial.
Absolutely crucial. It provided President Bernabeu with a critical period to scrutinize Carniglia's decisions from a distance, to listen to any internal complaints, and to amplify his own existing doubts about the manager.
Especially with the domestic form slipping.
Especially given the ongoing domestic struggle against Barcelona, it inadvertently set the stage for the dramatic firing later that summer, because Bernabeu was already looking for signs of weakness or, institutional disloyalty.
So if the domestic front was this messy, frustrating slog that ended in disappointment, the European campaign was an absolute gauntlet. It demanded every ounce of the team's new strength.
It did.
Let's trace their path to Stuttgart. It started with the early knockouts where they seemed measured, but then they really built up momentum.
Their progression began pretty cautiously. In the first round, Madrid faced Besiktas of Turkey. They secured a controlled 2-0 win at home, very efficient, but then followed it up with a pretty nervous 1-1 draw away in Istanbul.
So a 3-1 win on aggregate.
Right. It showed controlled progression, but the sources indicate a lack of that overwhelming dominance they'd shown in previous years. It suggests the team was still integrating Puskás and dealing with all that internal friction.
But then, in the quarterfinals against Wiener Sport Club, the power switch truly flipped to max performance.
It did.
They showed the whole of Europe exactly what this Puskás Di Stefano machine could do.
That tie was a masterclass. First in controlled aggression, and then in pure offensive explosion. They started with tactical patience, securing a 0-0 away draw in Vienna.
A classic Carniglia strategy.
It was. Ensure the tie stays alive, then unleash hell at the Bernabeu. And the return leg was exactly that. Explosive. It was a systematic deconstruction of the Viennese defense.
And the final score was?
A monumental 7-1 home victory. It still stands as one of the largest European wins in the club's history, and it served as a major warning to the rest of the continent.
And the centerpiece of that entire demolition was Alfredo Di Stefano, once again proving his status as the big game player.
Oh, he delivered a stunning world-class performance. He registered a phenomenal 4-goal haul in that single quarterfinal match.
4 goals in one game.
It just showcased Madrid's capability to absolutely explode offensively and dismantle any defense systematically when they were playing in front of their home crowd. Puskás, Gento, Mateos, Real, they all got in on the act, but Di Stefano was the undeniable star. He converted the strategic risks of his deep-lying role into an astonishing output of goals.
That sets the scene perfectly for the semifinal. And this wasn't just another tie. This was what the Spanish sources called the hidden final.
It was.
A brutal 3-part war against their city rivals, Atletico Madrid, coming right after those domestic losses to Barcelona.
The historical significance here cannot be overstated for you, the listener. This was a genuine watershed moment. It was the first time in the history of the European Cup that 2 clubs from the same city, 2 sworn local rivals, faced off in an international tournament.
A footballing civil war.
That's what the Spanish sources dubbed it. The Guerra Civil Futbolística. The winner knew they would represent the absolute pride of the capital city on the continent. The stakes were just immense.
The psychological pressure must have been through the roof. So how did the initial 2 legs play out, given that fierce local rivalry?
High tension and excruciatingly tight scorelines. That's what defined the contest. Real Madrid hosted the first leg and managed a narrow 2-1 victory.
But they had to fight for it.
Oh, they did. Atletico's captain, Usto, actually opened the scoring for the visitors. Madrid had to fight back with goals from Real and a crucial Puskás penalty, which showed their ability to recover.
And the second leg?
Atletico responded fiercely at their home ground, the Metropolitano, securing a 1-0 win thanks to a goal from Collar.
So that left the aggregate score tied at 2-2. And this is where the historical rules become so important. In the modern game, with the away goals rule.
Atletico would have advanced.
Right. But that didn't exist in 1959.
Exactly. And this is crucial context that just ratchets up the drama immensely. Since the away goals rule hadn't yet been adopted in the European Cup, a 2-2 aggregate tie necessitated a third decisive playoff match.
On neutral ground.
On neutral ground. This mechanism, designed to ensure fairness, turned the semifinal into a brutal winner-take-all miniature tournament between the 2 teams. It demanded a level of mental steel far beyond a regular 2-legged tie.
So the destiny of the European Cup essentially came down to this pressure cooker, 90-minute playoff game, held hundreds of kilometers away from the capital. Tell us about the atmosphere and the drama of that deciding match.
The decisive playoff was held at La Romareda in Zaragoza on May 13, 1959. The stadium was packed, split evenly between the 2 Madrid fan bases, and the sources note the palpable nerves and aggression.
Real Madrid had to assert its dominance.
They did, and they broke the deadlock early. Di Stefano scored in the 16th minute, and you might have thought, okay, they're going to run away with it now.
But Atletico immediately demonstrated their fierce resistance. They were not going to concede the city to their rivals.
Unbelievably, yes.
Oh.
Atletico equalized just 2 minutes later through Collar again. Just 2 minutes. That goal was a massive psychological blow for Real Madrid. They had established a lead, only to have it wiped out almost instantly by their rivals in a winner-take-all environment. The psychological weight of that moment, trying to find a second wind after such a rapid equalization, it must have been immense.
And once again, Puskás, having successfully shed all that weight and found his rhythm, he provided the definitive, season-saving moment.
He did. Just before halftime, in the 42nd minute, Frank Puskás scored the eventual winner. It was a goal born of sheer technical excellence under the most extreme pressure. It secured a grueling 2-1 victory.
And that result was everything.
It was vital. It was sheer resilience and the ability to win a highly localized, high-tension contest against their most intimate rival. It wasn't just a sporting victory. It was an institutional assertion of dominance, sending Real Madrid to their 4th consecutive European Cup final.
And so we finally arrive at the grand finale, June 3rd, 1959, at the Neckarstadion in Stuttgart, Germany. The opponent was familiar, Stade Reims.
The same French club they had defeated in that inaugural 1956 final.
That 56 final was a classic, right? A real thriller.
It was a crazy back-and-forth 4-3 thriller where Madrid had to launch this massive, exhausting comeback. The sources suggest that in 1959, after the physical toll of that Atletico semifinal and all the domestic struggles, Real Madrid desperately aimed for a less stressful final.
One they could control from the start.
Precisely. And they achieved that goal immediately. disrupting Reims' entire tactical plan with an astonishingly early strike,
Who scored it?
a clinical, immediate strike from Enrique Mateos. He was often overshadowed by the star quartet, but was a crucial goal threat in his own right. He scored within the first 2 minutes. The sources oscillate between the first and second minute mark.
And that just changed the whole complexion of the game.
It did. The goal was assisted by the long-serving captain, Jose Maria Zárraga. And that strike instantly neutralized Reims' planned rhythm, forcing them to chase the game and putting Madrid firmly in the driver's seat from the whistle.
But the smooth ride quickly hit a major, unexpected catastrophe. And it involved Raymond Kopa, who was actually playing against his former club.
This was arguably the biggest crisis point of the entire campaign. Kopa, the reigning European Footballer of the Year, a crucial cog in the attack.
Gets injured.
He was injured in the 15th minute by a challenge from his French national team colleague, Jean Vincent. And you must remember the rule of the era. No substitutions were allowed.
No subs at all.
None. Kopa was forced to remain on the pitch, but in a severely diminished capacity. He was visibly hobbling, effectively reduced to a passenger on the wing.
So Real Madrid had to play nearly 75 minutes of the European Cup final with essentially 10 active players.
10 men. It's an immense testament to the mental fortitude of that squad to play the biggest game of the year, functionally a man down, and still emerge victorious.
And the drama continued right after the injury, didn't it? There was a major debate over a penalty.
It did. A penalty was awarded to Madrid shortly after Kopa's injury. Enrique Mateos, feeling the confidence of having scored the opening goal, he insisted on taking the kick himself.
Over Di Stefano.
This was a direct decision to override the team's designated penalty taker, Alfredo Di Stefano, who had the guaranteed pedigree. Mateos stepped up, took the kick, and missed.
Oh no, so you have an injured star player and a missed penalty. That halftime locker room atmosphere must have been absolutely toxic.
Toxic is an understatement. The score is still only 1-0, despite that early dominance and the golden chance to double the lead. It's reported there was significant tension and verbal reprimands directed at Mateos for his decision-making.
Cornelia must have had his work cut out for him.
He had to address the mental state of a team that was a man down and had just squandered a critical opportunity. But despite the crisis, the genius of Di Stefano quickly restored order at the start of the second half.
He wasted absolutely no time. The mark of a true leader is stepping up when others falter.
That's the true sign of a clutch performer. Just after the break, in the 47th minute, Di Stefano struck the decisive final goal.
What a hit.
A powerful long-distance kick that left the Reims keeper with absolutely no chance.
Yeah.
This goal secured the final 2-0 scoreline and, critically, sealed Di Stefano's unique record of scoring in 4 consecutive European Cup finals.
Which is a record that speaks to his enduring brilliance and his ability to deliver when the stakes are highest.
Especially after the pressure applied by that missed penalty. It was a statement.
So Real Madrid wins their 4th straight European Cup, confirming their dynasty. And now we reach the institutional decision that defines this season more than any goal, the firing of a champion manager.
Immediately after he won the biggest trophy, it's the event that crystallized Bernabeu's management style. Luis Carniglia was sacked by President Bernabeu in July 1959, barely a month after lifting the club's 4th consecutive European Cup.
The timing is just unbelievable. It's the definition of ruthless.
Yet it's historically consistent with the standards of that club.
And the reason, the very core of the matter, it wasn't poor performance, it wasn't a tactical failure, it was a single technical decision regarding the lineup for the final.
That's it. The ultimate crux of the conflict was Carniglia's pragmatic, tactical decision to omit the recovering Ferenc Puskás from the starting XCI for the final.
He chose Mateos instead.
He chose the fitter, confident goal scorer Mateos instead. Carniglia, the professional manager, believed Puskás was simply not fully match fit after suffering a knock. He thought Mateos was the safer, more decisive option given the circumstances. He prioritized the result over the institutional mandate.
And that, in Santiago Bernabéu's mind, was an unforgivable offense. It wasn't about the result. It was about showcasing the acquisition.
Proving the worth of the investment.
And enforcing the idea that the president, not the coach, ultimately chose the team.
Exactly. The dismissal highlighted this deep, enduring tension between managerial autonomy and Bernabéu's burgeoning Galactico philosophy. Bernabeu saw Puskás as his personal propaganda coup, his statement signing.
So to leave him out of the final.
To omit Puskás from the biggest showcase event in world football, despite the eventual victory, was seen as an act of insubordination. A disrespect to the institutional vision. Carniglia's departure confirmed that, at Real Madrid, Winning was the bare minimum expectation.
And the real test was something else.
The real test was loyalty. Personnel decisions belonged to the top office, and tactical pragmatism could be grounds for immediate dismissal if it countered the president's political will.
So let's reflect on the legacy of this turbulent season and the figures who defined it. First, we have the manager, Luis Carniglia, who was unceremoniously dumped despite his incredible success.
Carniglia's managerial record speaks for itself, and it just proves the absurdity of his dismissal. During his short, high-pressure tenure, he won the 1958 La Liga title and back-to-back European Cups in *58 and '59.
And he had success after Madrid, too.
He did. His subsequent success, including winning the Fairs Cup with Roma in 1961, clearly demonstrates his quality was not in question. He was a great coach, but he failed the institutional test of presidential loyalty and obedience.
He prioritized winning the game over pleasing the president.
And that distinction cost him his job. Simple as that.
Then there is the constant, the reliable force amidst all the drama. The volatile superstar arrivals, the presidential mandates, Paco Gento. The '58-'59 season was just another chapter in his untouchable record.
Gento was the indispensable element. He was the rock in that dynamic forward line, alongside the volatile mixture of Di Stefano, Puskás, and Copa. His physical gifts were just immense.
He was incredibly fast.
Renowned as one of the fastest players in the game. He allegedly clocked 100 meters in around 11 seconds, and that was while controlling the ball. His speed on the left wing provided crucial, reliable width and service game after game.
And his overall longevity in the competition is unparalleled.
Absolutely. Gento's record of 6 European Cup wins is an enduring achievement that no player has yet matched and, likely never will. And crucially, he was the only player who featured in the final in 3 different decades. The 50s, the 60s, and the 70s.
He was the perpetual motion machine of that team.
The white ballet, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was constantly delivering, regardless of who the president signed or who the manager was. He provided consistency in an environment that was designed for chaos.
And finally, the successful, albeit high-drama, integration of the Puskás Di Stefano machine. It validated Bernabéu's ruthless recruitment strategy, didn't it?
It did.
It proved that the end's unprecedented dominance justified the means, even if it meant sacrificing a champion manager.
It absolutely did. The partnership solidified Madrid's status as the world's premier club, and 1958-59 was merely their inaugural run. They provided the ultimate, undeniable proof of Bernabéu's genius just 1 year later.
In the 1960 final.
The 1960 final against Eintracht Frankfurt, which is often cited as the greatest club match ever played. In that game, Di Stefano and Puskás combined for a staggering 7 goals.
7 goals between them.
The success proved definitively that Bernabéu's high-stakes, ambitious recruitment, bringing in established, even aging talent like Puskás, regardless of the internal chaos, was the correct, institutionally defining strategy. The cost of Carniglia's job was, in Bernabéu's mind, a small price to pay for establishing that standard of perfection.
So summarizing the 1958-59 season, it wasn't the smooth march of a flawlessly engineered machine. It was a masterclass in dynamic team building, getting Puskás fit, winning that semifinal war against Atletico, overcoming the injury to Copa. But it was all managed under this ruthless, non-negotiable institutional control from the presidency. It was a victory achieved through a volatile mixture of tactical flexibility, individual genius, and an institutional willingness to sacrifice anyone necessary to achieve the ultimate goal.
And it proved that in the early era of global club football, success was often dictated not just by tactics on the pitch, but by the dramatic, non-negotiable politics emanating from Santiago Bernabéu's office.
That DNA was set.
That club DNA, where the result is paramount and the manager is ultimately expendable, was cemented forever in the summer of 1959.
Which brings us to our final thought for you to chew on. Real Madrid's willingness to immediately discard a manager after a European Cup win simply because of a personnel choice that prioritized victory over presidential politics. It established this terrifying pattern of non-negotiable expectation.
It did.
We saw this pattern repeated later with other high-profile dismissals, even after domestic success. You think of Fabio Capello or Vicente Del Bosque. So the question is this. Does this aggressive, high turnover, and inherently political pursuit of perfection, where results are really the floor, not the ceiling, does that explain how the club created a dynasty that remains unmatched to this day by prioritizing the institution's image above all else? We are diving deep into the legendary 1960 European Cup final, held in Glasgow, where Real Madrid beat Eintracht Frankfurt 7-3.
Yeah.
And it's a match people often call, for good reason, the single greatest football match ever played.
And that's not just hyperbole. We've got a stack of sources here. Historical accounts, tactical breakdowns, even some personal anecdotes from the players, and they all confirm it. I mean, this result, even 65 years later, it's still the benchmark for a spectacular European final. It was a coronation.
The 5th title in a row.
Their 5th consecutive European title. The numbers alone are they defy modern logic. You have 10 total goals in a major final.
10.
2 separate players scoring hat-tricks for the winning side. And a world record attendance for the competition. 127,621 people.
It's just an insane number.
This wasn't just a win. It was the absolute unforgettable zenith of the Alfredo Di Stefano and Frank Puskás era.
I still can't get over the scoreline. 7-3. I mean, you hear that in, a high school game? Maybe an exhibition match?
Exactly. Not for the biggest trophy on the continent.
The Spanish blogs called it an artistic apocalypse, and I think that's about right. It speaks to this kind of pure, unrestrained attacking genius that we just rarely see today.
Well, not in a final. The stakes are too high.
But the part I love most is the story after the match. The image of the victorious Spanish team getting a long-standing ovation from a mostly Scottish crowd.
Right, a crowd who had just seen their own team, Rangers, get absolutely decimated by Frankfurt just a few weeks earlier.
Yeah.
That moment, the ovation, it's the ultimate sign of respect. It shows you what a spectacle this was, and it sets up this perfect narrative tension.
Mm-hmm.
On one side, you have Real Madrid, the 4-time defending champions, the European aristocrats.
And on the other?
The German debutantes.
Yeah.
The unfancied Eintracht Frankfurt, the Eagles. And they came in playing with what all the sources call this naive ambition.
They just steamrolled everyone to get there.
Completely. So this 1960 final, this was the quest for the Pentacampeonato, the 5th straight title. It's a feat that has never, ever been matched, not even in the modern Champions League era.
It sounds almost like fiction now.
It does. It's a level of uninterrupted continental supremacy that just seems impossible.
What's so fascinating, though, is that even inside this incredible dynasty, the season leading up to that 5th final was apparently just total chaos.
Chaos is the perfect word. The Spanish historical accounts call it la temporada de la transición caótica a la gloria absoluta, the chaotic transition to absolute glory.
So they were still winning, but things were falling apart behind the scenes.
There was intense friction. You had massive player egos, Bernabeu's huge expectations, tactical disagreements. It was a mess.
And a lot of that friction was around the manager's seat, right? With Puskás kind of at the center of it all.
He was the lightning rod. The manager who won them the '59 title, Luis Carneglia, was shockingly sacked.
But he just won the European Cup, and I read he was the one who got Puskás back into shape.
He was. He was a huge figure. Puskás arrived seriously overweight, out of shape, and Carneglia was instrumental in getting him match fit.
So why on earth fire him?
It was a few things. But the main reason that's documented was his decision to leave Puskás out of the starting lineup for the 1959 final.
Just for that one decision.
Bernabeu saw Puskás and Di Stefano as the stars. The show.
Sure.
They were irreplaceable. Carneglia was a bit too rigid, maybe, struggled to handle those colossal egos.
The original Galactico.
In a way, yes. So firing a European Cup-winning manager just shows you that for Bernabeu, the spectacle and the star power, that came above everything else.
It's incredible. So who gets the job of stepping into this, high-stakes, volatile dressing room just a month before the biggest final of the year?
They turned to one of their own,
Yeah.
Miguel Muñoz. And he wasn't just a former captain.
He was part of the club's DNA.
Yeah, absolutely. He was the guy who scored their first ever European goal back in '55. He took over in March 1960.
And his job was, what, just don't mess this up.
Basically. Stabilize the egos, restore some discipline, and most importantly, unleash the full attacking power of Di Stefano, Puskás, and Gento.
That's a huge ask in less than 2 months. Did he face a lot of resistance?
The sources say it was difficult, but Muñoz had the authority of a club legend, and that helped. And he succeeded instantly.
Right.
He guided them through the rest of the league and then, of course, to this victory. And in doing so, he became the first person ever to win the European Cup as a player and as a manager.
Wow.
It really speaks to his psychological skill, not just his tactics. He took total chaos and turned it into the absolute pinnacle of their dynasty.
Okay, so let's pivot to the opponents. Eintracht Frankfurt. They were the ultimate outsiders in this story.
Totally different side of European football. They'd just won the German Meisterschaft for the first and only time in 1959. Their coach, Paul Oswald, was a former teacher. very disciplined, very philosophical.
And what was their style of play?
It's always described as naive ambition. They were just fearless, super aggressive, all-out attack, maybe a bit unsophisticated compared to Madrid's continental style.
But they scored a lot of goals.
A ton of goals.
Yeah.
In their national championship run, they averaged over 4 goals a game. They just believed they could outscore anyone, even the giants.
That kind of confidence must have been unnerving for some teams. I also read this really strange detail about how they even got into the tournament.
It's a bizarre little footnote to history, isn't it?
Yeah, that they weren't even supposed to be there.
Well, they only got in because the Finnish champions, a team called QPS, had to withdraw.
Why?
Financial issues. They couldn't afford the travel, and their pitch wasn't available in the winter. So Frankfurt got a walkover. They backed into the competition without even kicking a ball.
Incredible.
But once they were in, that naive ambition quickly became something pretty terrifying for the rest of Europe.
Okay, so the path to Glasgow for both teams was just filled with drama. But before we even get to the football, we have to talk about the Puskás diplomatic crisis. This almost canceled the whole thing.
It's a perfect storm, really. You got Cold War history, geopolitics, and this old grievance all mixed together.
And it all stems from the 1954 World Cup final.
Exactly. Puskás was a star of that legendary Hungarian team, the Mighty Magyars. After they lost that final to West Germany, he publicly accused the German players of using performance-enhancing drugs.
Which was a massive accusation at the time.
Huge. And the German Football Association, the DFB, they never forgot it.
So they held a grudge?
A serious one. They were so incensed that they issued a blanket ban. No German club, including Frankfurt, was allowed to play against any team that had Fran Puskás on it.
And here he is, about to play them in the European Cup final.
Suddenly, the whole event is hanging by a thread.
So what happened? How did they fix it?
Puskás was forced to apologize. The DFB wouldn't budge. So to allow the game to happen, Puskás had to issue a formal, written apology to the German FA.
That must have been humiliating for him.
Absolutely. But it was a pragmatic choice. The final had to happen. But the irony here, when you look back, is just so thick.
You're talking about the Pervitin stuff?
Exactly. Modern research has basically verified what Puskás suspected all along.
So he was right.
It turns out the German players were injected with something later identified as Pervitin, which is a methamphetamine, during that 1954 tournament. So he was forced to apologize for something that was actually true.
Wow. That adds this incredible layer of personal drama to his performance in the final, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. It becomes a grudge match. He's scoring 4 goals against the very nation that demanded he retract the truth.
Just incredible. Okay, so let's look at Madrid's path. We know they were a bit vulnerable that season. Where did that show up?
Well, as champions, they got a bye, so their journey was short, just 7 matches. They started with a huge 12-2 aggregate win over Jeunesse Esch.
Right.
But the vulnerability really showed in the quarterfinals against Nice.
They lost the away leg.
They did 3-2, and that was a massive scare. It showed that this dynasty could be beaten, especially away from home. They had to rely on the Bernabeu atmosphere to rally, and they did, winning 4-0 at home.
But the real test was the semifinal.
The semifinal against Barcelona. This was more than a football match. The Spanish media called it a guerra civil futbolística, a football civil war. The rivalry was at its absolute peak. The winner would represent Spain in Europe.
How intense did it get?
The sources talk about fan riots, lots of police intervention, especially at the Camp Nou match. The tension was so high, there was talk of forcing a replay over some decisions.
But Madrid got through.
Emphatically, they won both legs 3-1, a 6-2 aggregate win. And that victory, under all that pressure, that was the proof that Muñoz needed. This team could handle anything.
So while Madrid is fighting a civil war at home, Frankfurt is just tearing Europe apart.
They were the German destroyers. They got past Young Boys and Wiener Sport Club, and then came the semifinal against Glasgow Rangers.
And this is where they really announced themselves.
This was the moment. The aggregate score against Rangers is genuinely shocking.
What was it again?
They won 6-1 at home. Then they went to Ibrox and Glasgow and won 6-3.
So 12-4 on aggregate.
A 12-4 annihilation of a very good Scottish team.
The Scottish fans must have been just stunned. And that's what leads to this unique connection they built with Glasgow.
Exactly. The Rangers crowd, having watched their team get taken apart, were just amazed by the quality of Frankfurt's attacking football.
Hey, so they applauded them.
They stood and applauded the German team off the pitch. It was this incredible act of sportsmanship, and it made Frankfurt hugely popular in Glasgow, building this massive anticipation for their return to apart to play Madrid.
They came back to Scotland as conquering heroes, in a way.
In the eyes of the local fans, absolutely.
We've set the stage. Now, let's get on the pitch. Because this final wasn't just about goals. It was a tactical revolution in some ways.
It was a fascinating clash of styles, a contrast between rigidity and a sort of revolutionary fluidity.
So Frankfurt was the rigid side.
Right. They used a pretty standard, disciplined WM formation, very structured. Munoz, on the other hand, was running this fluid hybrid system. It shifted between a 3-5-2 and a 3-2-5.
And what did that system emphasize?
High pressing, quick counters, and most importantly, extreme positional flexibility. The forwards especially were just constantly interchanging positions. That was highly unusual for the era.
And the data from the match, which we can look at now, it really shows how different the game was back then.
The numbers are a window into another world. The total shot count was 42 shots from both teams combined.
Wow. What would a modern final be?
Maybe 27, 29 on a busy day. This was just non-stop, end-to-end action, a back-and-forth shot fest, as it was described.
And the pass completion rates were really low, which points to that direct style.
Absolutely. Madrid completed only 69% of their passes. Frankfurt was at 61%.
Modern teams are aiming for what, 90%?
At least 85, yeah. And this wasn't just because the Hampden Park pitch was bumpy. It was intentional. They weren't interested in patient buildup. It was all about getting the ball forward fast.
And the goalkeepers were just launching it.
The contrast is amazing. Modern keepers average a pass length of, say, 30 to 40 meters. In this game, Madrid's keeper averaged nearly 49 meters, and Frankfurt's was over 50.
Just kicking it over the midfield battle.
Exactly. Get it to the forwards and let them fight for it.
And at the center of all this for Madrid was the revolutionary figure, Alfredo Di Stefano. He wasn't just a striker.
He was the entire tactical thesis. I love the quote from Helenio Herrera. If Pele was the lead violinist, Di Stefano was the entire orchestra.
He was listed as the number 9, but he played everywhere.
He was the original total footballer, what we'd now call a false 9. He was constantly dropping deep, sometimes into his own half, just to get the ball and start the attack.
The on-field commander.
Totally. Directing traffic, gesturing, organizing. He was the hub. Everything radiated from him.
And his goals in the final reflect that. He goes from organizer to finisher in a split second.
Absolutely. His first 2 goals are classic examples of that. He helped start the move, and then he's there in the box to finish it. But then his third goal, the hat-trick goal, is completely different.
That was the long-range one.
A powerful, long-range rocket from outside the box. It just shows he was a threat from absolutely everywhere. The mind of a midfielder with the instincts of a killer striker.
So if Di Stefano was the orchestra, Ferenc Puskás was the specialized weapon, the sharpshooter.
The lethal weapon, yeah. But we have to remember what he looked like when he first got to Madrid.
Right, the anecdotes are amazing.
He was seriously out of shape after 2 years away from the game. Amancio Amaro's joke, that bugger played pregnant, sort of sums it up. He had to lose 15 kilograms.
But once he was on the pitch, none of that mattered because of that left foot.
The talent was just undeniable, legendary. Canario said he didn't have a foot, he had a hand.
He wasn't as mobile as Di Stefano?
No, his movement was confined to what was described as a 5-meter space, but those 5 meters were golden. That's all he needed.
So he was the advanced finisher waiting for Di Stefano to create the space.
Exactly. It's the same role he had in the great Hungarian team. In this final, he was just relentless. He took 11 shots, 5 more than anyone else on the pitch. He was the end product.
And we can't forget Francisco Gento on the wing. His pace was the key that unlocked everything.
Gento was the jet engine. His blistering speed just terrified defenders, pulled them out of position. He got crucial assists, including the cross for Puskás' very rare header.
And he won the penalty.
The controversial penalty, yes. His speed just forced the defender into a mistake. He was the catalyst for so many key moments.
Now, on Frankfurt's side, they still scored 3 goals. That's no small feat. Who was their main threat?
They relied a lot on their wing play, but their central threat was their center forward, Erwin Stein. Richard Kress on the right was a regular menace, but Stein scored 2 and assisted the other. He was their guy.
And how did he get space against Madrid's defense?
He used these really disciplined, peeled runs into the right channel. He was great at exploiting the space that Di Stefano left when he dropped deep. For that era of tight man marking, his movement was incredibly effective.
He carried a huge burden for them.
A massive, valiant, offensive burden.
Okay, the stage is set. Let's go to the night itself. May 18, 1960. A warm, windy evening in Glasgow. What was the atmosphere like?
Electric. Absolutely electric. You have 127,621 spectators crammed into Hampden Park, a record that will never be broken, and it was on TV across Europe, an estimated 70 million people watching. It was a true continental event.
And Madrid, the huge favorites, they start slowly, almost overconfident.
They did, and Frankfurt went for it right away. They knew they needed an early goal. Within the first minute, Eric Meyer hits the crossbar. It was an immediate warning shot.
And that aggression pays off in the 18th minute.
Yes. Stein drives to the byline, puts in a great cross, and Richard Kress volleys it home. 1-0 Frankfurt. The debutants have shocked the world.
But that goal, instead of demoralizing Madrid, it made them angry.
The reaction was visceral. The defender, Jose Santamaria, described it perfectly. He said, it was like a sting from a huge bee. Suddenly, you're desperate, frantic. You react.
And they reacted with fury.
A ruthless fury. The comeback was devastatingly quick.
So 27th minute, they equalize.
Just 9 minutes after conceding. Canario with a low cross, and Di Stefano is there to finish it. 1-1. The momentum had already swung.
And then he scored again almost right away.
3 minutes later. The Frankfurt keeper, Egon Loy, he parries a shot from Canario, and Di Stefano, who is always in the right place, pounces on the loose ball and fires it into the roof in the net.
2-1 Madrid.
And those two quick goals just seemed to sap all the energy and belief out of Frankfurt.
And then came the real killer blow, right before halftime.
The execution was cruel. 45th minute, almost a minute into stoppage time, Puskás makes it 3-1 with a clinical left-footed shot.
Just demoralizing.
Completely. The Guardian said Eintracht looked demoralized by some of the dummies sold to them by Alfredo Di Stefano and Ferenc Puskás.
So we go into the second half, and this is where the Puskás show really begins.
Absolutely. The second half was a showcase for his left foot. 56th minute, he gets his second from the penalty spot.
And this was the controversial one.
Very contested. Gento drives into the box, goes down under a challenge from Lutz. Most sources say he was no more than muscled out. It was a soft call from the referee, Jack Marwet.
A gift.
But Puskás converted the gift, 4-1.
And just 4 minutes later, he gets his hat trick with a header, of all things.
Which was so rare for him. A blistering counterattack. Gento crosses it in, and Puskás heads it home. 5-1. At this point, Madrid are just in full exhibition mode.
And he wasn't done.
Not at all. 71st minute, he smashes in his fourth goal. And that set the single final scoring record that still stands today, 6-1.
The game is over, but the scoring isn't. The last 3 goals come in this crazy 2-minute burst.
And you have to give Frankfurt credit, they never quit. 72nd minute, Erwin Stein pulls one back, 6-2.
And Madrid's response is instant.
Almost petulant. Like, how dare you score on us? A minute later, in the 73rd, Di Stefano strides forward and fires home a low shot for his own hat-trick, 7-2.
And Stein gets one more.
The final goal of the game, in the 75th minute. Stein scores again, ensuring Frankfurt gained, as the reports say, a little respect in the rout. And that's your final spectacular score, 7-3.
That 7-3 scoreline is it's the ultimate proof of that first great Madrid dynasty. It was an instructional masterpiece in attacking football.
Let's just run through the records they set that night, because the list is just unbelievable.
Okay.
First, 7-3, 10 total goals, still the highest scoring European final ever.
Right.
Second, and this is the really unique one, it's the only final in history where 2 players on the same team scored a hat-trick. Di Stefano with 3, Puskás with 4.
And Puskás 4 is a record on its own.
The individual record for a final, yeah. And then finally, the attendance. 127,621 people, a record that will almost certainly never be broken.
The media reaction must have been just as big.
It was euphoric. The BBC commentator, Kenneth Wolstenholme, called it by far the most delectable feast I ever described.
And Puskás himself knew how special it was.
He called it one of those blissful times when the whole team seemed to play brilliantly and we almost achieved some sort of footballing perfection.
And that perfection was really appreciated by the Scottish fans. They saw something totally new that night.
Santamaria explained it beautifully. He said Madrid had this blend of European discipline and South American picaresque, this technical speed, this cheekiness.
Right.
He said in Northern Europe, football was about strength and speed, but Madrid would put the ball between your legs just for the artistry of it, and the fans loved it.
Now, what about Frankfurt? How do you even process a defeat like that?
Their manager, Paul Oswald, insisted the team was defeated with their heads up, never gave up. And they were praised for their spirit. I mean, he scored 3 goals.
Right.
One of their key players, Alfred Pfaff, he just admitted, you have to admit, that was the best team at that time. They knew they'd run into a buzzsaw.
And there's that great story about the match ball, with both superstars having a claim to it.
It's one of the best sportsmanship stories ever. Puskás said he and Di Stefano were literally playing keep away with it at the final whistle. Both wanted it.
And Puskás won.
He got the ball. But then Erwin Stein, the Frankfurt striker who'd scored 2 goals, came over and asked for it.
And Puskás gave it to him.
After Stein asked a third time,
Mm-hmm.
Puskás handed it over and said something like, well, you're much nicer when you win. It just shows the level of respect there.
Amazing. And that connection with Glasgow was really solidified that night.
There's a genuine love affair. The affection was undeniable, the best proof. When the team flew back to Madrid the next day, the fullback Marquitos got off the plane wearing full Highland dress. Kilt, sporran, the whole thing.
That's fantastic. But this incredible victory was also the end of an era, the climax of that first dynasty.
It was the absolute peak of the mountain. The relationships that defined that team started to fracture after this. Most famously, Di Stefano left a few years later after a huge falling out with the manager, Miguel Muñoz.
A bitter end.
A very fiery end. Di Stefano said, Muñoz told me to fluck off, and they kicked me out of the club because I told him to fluck off back.
Wow.
But that split allowed Muñoz to fully build his next great team. He transitioned away from the expensive foreign stars of the 50s and built the Yeye generation.
The Yeye generation, named after the Beatles, what did that mean for the club?
It was a huge cultural shift. This was a younger team, mostly Spanish players like Amancio Amaro. They had longer hair, bit of a hippie look. It was a break from the past.
And Muñoz coached them to another European Cup.
He did in 1966. It just proved his genius as a manager, that he could oversee these huge shifts in club philosophy and still win.
Before we wrap up, we have to touch on the socio-political context one last time with Franco's regime.
It's crucial, yeah. You had to separate the sport from how it was used. Real Madrid's success was a massive soft power tool for Franco. It projected this successful, respected image of Spain to the rest of Europe.
It was a distraction.
It was a very effective culture of evasion, channeling working-class passions into sport instead of political dissent. The club's dominance provided huge political utility for the regime.
But regardless of that complex backdrop, the sporting achievement itself is just. It's the platinum standard.
Absolutely. The 7-3 win, the 5th title, it created the spirit of Hampton that Madrid still talks about today. It defined their identity, not just winning, but winning with spectacular attacking flair.
So when you boil it all down, the 7-3 spectacular was this volatile mix. You had Di Stefano's total football, Puskás' lethal finishing, and the valiant effort of Frankfurt, who helped make it a real contest.
Precisely. The match cemented Madrid's place as European royalty. It defined the competition from the very start as this theatrical, high-scoring spectacle. It set a bar that almost no one has reached since.
And that really leads us to the big question to leave everyone with.
The 1960 final, even though it was a blowout, it inspired generations. It proved that the greatest thing a team can give you is not just a win, but an exhibition. So we'll leave you with this provocative thought. In today's tactically rigid, data-driven, defensively obsessed modern era, could a 7-3 final with 2 hat-tricks ever truly happen again?
Or was that beautiful game at Hampden Park just a wonderful, unrepeatable accident of history? A snapshot of a more innocent, more ambitious time in football? Something to think about next time you see a final decided 1-0. Thanks for diving deep with us.
And so, naturally, everyone watching that game, the fans, the press, the other clubs, they all thought, okay, this is it. This is the new standard. Real Madrid is going to rule forever.
They just won their 5th straight European Cup. They looked untouchable.
And that's the twist.
That is the trap, because that moment, that glorious 7-3 victory, it wasn't a new beginning. It was a funeral.
A funeral. That's a heavy word for a 7-3 win.
It was the funeral for an era. Because right after that, the team that looked like gods just walked straight into the wilderness. For 6 years, from 60 to 66, Real Madrid didn't just fail to win, they collapsed.
From invincibles to
getting knocked out by teams they wouldn't have even considered rivals a year before.
And that is the mission of this deep dive. We're not just looking at the wins, we're looking at the wilderness years. We want to understand the anatomy of a collapse. I mean, how does the greatest team in history fall apart so quickly? Was it just that they got old?
No, it was something much deeper. This wasn't a graceful slide into retirement. It wasn't a wave to the fans and a fadeaway. It was a violent rupture. It was aging excellence colliding head-on of a tactical revolution in European football.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Because to understand the fall, We really have to get into the mindset in late 1960. You said 5 straight cups?
Hmm.
That has to do something to your psychology, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. They basically had a monopoly. In their minds, the European Cup was their private property. It wasn't just confidence, it was mythology. They felt that just by stepping onto the pitch, the game was already half won because they were Real Madrid.
The white shirt does the work for you.
The badge plays the game, exactly. But then comes 1961, and the first cracks appear. And crucially, it's against their biggest rival, Barcelona.
In the first round of the 1960-61 season.
And this was a massive, massive shock to the system. Barcelona knocks them out 4-3 on aggregate. But if you read the Madrid press from that time, which is always a fascinating window into the club's psyche, they didn't talk about tactics. They talked about robbery.
Oh, right. I saw this in the notes. The Madraside.
Madraside. It's so dramatic, isn't it? Like a crime scene investigation.
Well, to be fair, there were some very questionable calls. 2 English referees, a Mr. Ellis and a Mr. Leaf.
Right. The first leg had a controversial penalty, but the second leg, that's where the Madraside legend really takes hold. Referee Leaf disallowed 4 Real Madrid goals.
Hold on, 4? 4 disallowed goals in one game.
4. 3 for offside, 1 for a foul.
Okay, I can see why the fans would scream conspiracy. If my team has 4 goals wiped off the board in an elimination game, I'm probably yelling Madraside too.
And look, the controversy was real. It was a mess. But if we sort of strip away the emotion, focusing on the refereeing actually misses the bigger point. Because underneath all that chaos, the reality was Barcelona was just better organized.
Organized how? Madrid had the superstars.
But Barcelona had Luis Suarez running the midfield. And just to clarify for everyone, this isn't the Uruguayan Luis Suarez we all know. This is the original Spanish legend, the architect.
The golden mirror.
Exactly. He was the metronome. Barcelona showed that if you could organize your midfield and cut off the supply lines to Di Stefano and Puskás, Madrid's whole individual brilliance model it fell apart. This suffocated the service.
So while Madrid was screaming about the referee, Barcelona was actually exposing a structural flaw.
Precisely. It was the first time the myth was punctured. But because of all the refereeing drama, Madrid just dismissed it. They didn't look in the mirror. They said the ref robbed us, not we were tactically outmaneuvered.
Denial is a powerful drug.
It blinds you. It tells you that you don't need to change.
So they brush it off as a fluke. They go into 1962 thinking, we're still the kings. And to their credit, they get right back to the final in Amsterdam.
And this match. This is the one that really hurts. This is the 1962 final against Benfica. If the Barcelona game was a hairline fracture, this is the earthquake that brings the building down.
The ultimate old guard versus new blood showdown.
You've got it. Real Madrid, the aging aristocrats, against Benfica, the rising power.
And for the first half, it looks like the aristocrats have it. In fact, it looks like 1960 all over again. Puskás scores a hat-trick in the first half.
It was mesmerizing. You have to remember, Ferenc Puskás is 35 years old at this point. Di Stefano is 35. These guys should be winding down. And yet here they are, leading 3-2 at halftime in a European final.
So the locker room at halftime must be buzzing. They're thinking, see, we've still got it. The overwhelming force still works.
It looked like the glory days were back. But then halftime ends, and the second half, well, that's when a reality makes a house call.
What changed?
It was tactical and it was physical. Benfica's manager, Bela Gutmann, a brilliant, eccentric mind, he reorganizes them at the break. He realizes Madrid is tired, the legs are heavy, and so he unleashes Eusebio.
The Black Panther.
He was 20 years old, a kid. But he had pace, power, everything. In that second half, he didn't just outplay Madrid. He physically destroyed them. He just ran right past their aging defense.
It's that classic image of the old lion swatting at the young lion, but it's just half a second too slow.
That's exactly it. The mind is there, but the body just can't respond. Benfica scores 2 quick goals, Eusebio seals it, and they win 5-3.
Wow. That's almost a mirror image. In 1960, they win 7-3. 2 years later, they lose 5-3.
It proved that physical reality could no longer be hidden by technical skill. You can be the smartest player in the world, but if a 20-year-old Eusebio runs past you, you just can't catch him. The great man can't stop time.
So the cracks are visible, the legs are going. But then comes 1963, and this isn't a crack. This is the floor falling out from under them.
This is the nadir, the absolute rock bottom.
We're talking about Anderlecht. Now, no disrespect to Belgian football, but in 1963, Real Madrid losing to Anderlecht. That's just not supposed to happen, is it?
Not at all. Anderlecht were considered minnows. A nice, hard-working team, but not European royalty. But here's the scene. First leg, at home in the Bernabeu. Their fortress. And they scrape a 3-3 draw.
Oof. A draw at home against Minnows? That must have gone down well.
It was toxic. The fans, the Madridistas, they turned. There were 100,000 people in that stadium, and they started booing their own team.
Their own legends.
Can you imagine the sound? 100,000 people whistling and jeering the players who won them 5 European Cups.
That's visceral. That's the sound of an illusion shattering.
And it gets worse. The return leg in Brussels, Anderlecht plays this disciplined, efficient game. They're not scared of the white shirts. And late in the match, Jeff Durian scores. Anderlecht wins 1-0. Madrid is out.
Knocked out by Anderlecht. That feels completely different from losing to Benfica.
It was a psychological catastrophe. Losing to champions like Benfica.
Okay.
Losing to your rivals, Barcelona, it hurts, but okay. But losing to a team of nobodies from Belgium, that meant the fear factor was gone.
The aura had just evaporated.
Completely.
Yeah.
It meant you didn't need superstars to beat Real Madrid anymore. You just needed to be organized. The mystique was dead.
And this leads us to the biggest tactical lesson of the whole era, the 1964 final. Because if Anderlecht showed that discipline could beat Madrid, Inter Milan turned it into a science.
This is the moment. It's two entire philosophies colliding in Vienna. On one side, you have Real Madrid, the 1950s style, attacking chaos, the 3-2-5. On the other, you have Helenio Herrera's Inter Milan, the embodiment of Catenaccio.
The doorbolt. Now,
Yeah.
I want to pause here, because people hear Catenaccio and they just think boring. They think parking the bus. Was it really just that?
No, and that's a common misconception. Catenaccio wasn't just passive defense. It was the proactive destruction of the opponent's game plan. It was surgical.
What do you mean? What was Herrera actually doing?
Man marking. Strict, relentless man marking. Every Madrid star had a specific shadow. Wherever Puskás went, a defender was breathing down his neck. They were shackled. They couldn't turn. They couldn't get the ball in space.
So no space to breathe, let alone create.
Exactly. But here is the genius part. Behind that line of man markers, Inter had the libero, the sweeper, Armando Pichi.
The spare man.
His job was to sweep up anything that got through. So think about it. Di Stefano beats his marker if he even can, and Armando Pichi is just there waiting, completely free to take the ball away. It created a numerical advantage in defense that the 3-2-5 just couldn't solve.
It sounds like trying to play football in a straitjacket.
It was a trap. Inter invited Madrid forward. Come on, attack us. Madrid would push up, lose the ball, and boom. Inter hits the empty space on the counter. Sandro Mazzola just had a field day.
Final score was 3-1 to Inter.
And it wasn't even that close, really. It proved that overwhelming force was dead. Organized systems now beat individual talent. The romantic era of the 50s was officially over.
But here's the thing that confuses me. While all this is happening in Europe, losing to Benfica, humiliated by Anderlecht, trapped by Inter Real Madrid, is destroying everyone back home in Spain.
It's the great paradox of this era, isn't it? Between 1961 and 1965, they won 5 straight La Liga titles. They were untouchable in Spain.
So how do you reconcile that? How can you be finished in Europe, but invincible at home?
It really comes down to tactical sophistication. The Spanish domestic teams, they just weren't at the level of the Italians tactically, or the Portuguese physically. They played a style that Madrid's raw quality could still just overwhelm.
So in Spain, Di Stefano and Puskás were still good enough to just win on talent alone.
Easily. But this created what you could call an institutional paradox. The domestic wins masked the rot. They kept winning the league so the board and fans would think, see, we're still great, just bad luck in Europe.
It gave them a false sense of security. It validated the old methods.
Exactly. It made the fall so much harder to accept because their domestic reality told them they were still kings. It delayed the necessary changes.
It's like being the smartest kid in your high school, getting straight A's without trying, and then you go to a top university and fail your first exam because you don't actually know how to study.
That's a perfect analogy. The context changed, but they didn't. And the psychological burden was immense. For Madrid, losing isn't just a defeat, it's a violation of the natural order. This myth of invincibility became a trap.
So how did they fix it? Because we know the story doesn't end here. They do come back. But it must have required some serious surgery.
It required ruthlessness. The president, Santiago Bernabeu, and the manager, Miguel Muñoz, they realized they couldn't just buy their way out of this with aging stars anymore. They tried it briefly, actually.
With the Brazilians, Didi and Canario.
Right. World champions, incredible players. But it didn't work. They were still trying to put a new coat of paint on a crumbling house.
So if buying stars doesn't work, what's left?
You breen the forest to let the new trees grow. They pivoted to a policy of Spanish youth. They started signing young, hungry, athletic Spanish players. Amancio Amaro, Zoco, Piri.
This is the famous Yeye team.
That's them. Named after the Beatles chorus, yeah, 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 because they were young and trendy, they represented the new Spain. But the transition had a dark side, a really difficult one.
You're talking about Di Stefano.
I am. After that 1964 final loss to enter the tactical humiliation, Santiago Bernabé made a decision. Di Stefano wanted to keep playing. He was the soul of the club, but Bernabé said no.
Wow. That is cold. The man who basically built modern Real Madrid.
It was incredibly brutal. It was a severing of the past. Di Stefano left angry, feeling betrayed. But Bernabé and Muñoz knew that as long as Di Stefano was on the pitch, the team would always revolve around him. They couldn't modernize as long as the god of the stadium was demanding the ball.
So they had to sacrifice the legend to save the club.
They chose the future over the past. They moved from an international star team to a hardworking all-Spanish squad. A team where the system was bigger than any one player.
And that brings us to the redemption. Our mission for this deep dive is to understand the comprehensive rebuilding effort that was required to navigate that massive generational transition. We're going to trace how Real Madrid reclaimed their European throne with a revolutionary all-Spanish team known famously as the Yeye generation.
And we have to talk about why that success came despite some very serious domestic struggles that threatened to derail the whole project.
Exactly.
The domestic struggles are the essential paradoxical context here. I mean, this was a team that, on paper, was dominant.
Right, they had the wins.
They did, yet they failed to capture the league title, which made Europe an all-or-nothing proposition for institutional validation. The story we're telling is one of profound institutional continuity. A deliberate decision to abandon the reliance on expensive global stardom and instead commit fully to nurturing and trusting Spanish youth, even when that choice was unpopular or difficult.
And before we get into the X's and O's of the rebuild, let's just anchor ourselves in the cultural moment, because the name itself tells you everything you need to know about the shift. The team was nicknamed Yeye.
Yes.
Now, if you're a listener who remembers the mid-1960s, you know, this refers to the explosive, vibrant rock and roll culture that was sweeping the continent.
Indeed. The nickname came directly from the Beatles' iconic chorus, and She Loves You, yeah, yeah, yeah. And what's fascinating is how instantly the club's new look, style, and philosophy just aligned with this concept. It's an embrace of youth, of exuberance, and, a defiance against the state establishment.
And the club didn't just passively receive this nickname, did they? They actively owned it, which really cemented the image in the public consciousness.
That's the crucial anecdote. Just 3 days after winning the final in Brussels, 4 of the key young players, Piri, Zoco, Manuel Sanchez-Martinez, and Ramon Grosso, posed for the prominent sports daily Diario Marca.
And what were they doing?
They were wearing full, shaggy, Beatles-style wigs, smiling, embracing this whole hippie look. That single photo session was a declaration.
Think about the contrast it created in the minds of the fans. I mean, the previous Di Stefano era was often depicted as regal, almost monarchical.
A seriousness that demanded reverence, absolutely.
And this new Yeye generation, with their slightly longer hair, high energy, and their willingness to pose in novelty wigs, felt modern, relatable, and just absolutely exuberant.
It was a form of cultural branding that directly appealed to Spanish youth who were just starting to experience the apertura, that slow, gradual opening of Spanish society in the 1960s. The club was saying, we are still giants, but now we're the giants of your generation.
So that's the atmosphere of rejuvenation. But, revolution is difficult, and teams don't just organically replace the greatest lineup in history.
Okay.
This transformation required surgical and often ruthless management from a man who embodied the club's institutional DNA, Miguel Muñoz.
Right. If we look at the timeline, the crisis demanding this rebuild didn't start in 1965.
No, it had been building.
It had been building for years. After winning 5 consecutive European Cups, the well ran dry. The club had lost subsequent finals in '62 to Benfica and '64 to Inter Milan, and they'd suffered a truly humiliating quarterfinal exit to Anderlecht in 1963. Muñoz, who had been in charge since 1960, had a singular, monumental task: transition away from these fading legends without sacrificing the European mandate.
And his authority was based on a unique perspective. He wasn't just a manager, he was the ultimate insider.
He was the bridge incarnate. Muñoz had been the first Real Madrid captain to lift the European Cup back in 1956. Then, 4 years later, he coached the team to the 1960 title.
So he'd seen it from both sides.
Both sides. He held the singular distinction of being the first person in history to win the competition as both a player and a coach. This gave him a level of institutional respect And, frankly, that required ruthlessness that no outsider could have wielded. He knew what a European champion looked like from the inside out.
The moment the Yeye era truly began, the point of no return for this transition, was really the fallout from that 1964 final loss to Inter Milan. The aging superstars, led by Alfredo Di Stefano, clashed openly with Munoz's tactical planning.
The sources confirm this was the flashpoint. Munoz was trying to adapt, introducing more fluid, modern defensive tactics to counter Inter's Catenaccio system. Di Stefano, who was nearly 38 and accustomed to leading every aspect of the team, reportedly just dismissed these tactical innovations.
He wasn't having it.
Not at all. And Munoz, who had to publicly defend his decisions, was reaching his limit. He recognized that the Argentine legend was slowing down, and the physical demands of modern football were eclipsing his genius.
That brings us to the famous confrontation. Di Stefano, always his own loudest critic and a huge voice in the locker room, questioned Munoz when he was dropped for the immediate next match against Atletico Madrid. Munoz's response has since become, well, the definitive declaration of managerial supremacy.
That's the moment of maximum drama. Munoz looked the legend in the eye and delivered the simple, chilling, and absolutely authoritative line, "I don't have to give you explanations."
No.
That statement wasn't just a clapback. It was a non-negotiable assertion that the manager and the club's institutional future held priority over the past glories of individual stars.
Yeah, and he followed through on it.
He did. Munoz wrote a report recommending Di Stefano retire from the club. Di Stefano left that summer for Espanyol. It was a painful, highly criticized, but entirely necessary act to pave the way for the youth. The message to the remaining senior players was stark. Adapt to the new fitness demands and tactics, or follow the legend out the door.
And this renewal wasn't just a philosophical choice, was it? It was also driven by a crucial regulatory context, a factor that's often overlooked, but is essential to the Yeye identity.
This is where the story gets structurally unique. Spain had implemented a national policy of protectionism in football.
Why was that?
It was following the disappointing performance of the national team at the 1962 World Cup. They imposed a strict ban on foreign player transfers to La Liga clubs.
So what was the immediate effect of this ban on a super club like Real Madrid?
It was revolutionary. I mean, for a club whose entire history of European dominance had been built on signing the best global talent, Puskás from Hungary, Di Stefano from Argentina, they were suddenly forced to look exclusively inward.
The Galacticos model was dead, for now.
Legally impossible. Real Madrid had to scour the domestic market, relying heavily on their youth academy, La Fábrica, and Spanish signings. This legally mandated constraint became the defining feature of the 1966 team. It was, by necessity, an exclusively Spanish 11.
So who were the key arrivals for the 1965-66 season that solidified this all-Spanish core?
While Munoz needed specific profiles to fit the new system, they brought in Antonio Calpe, a robust defender from Levante who provided defensive depth. More critically, the midfielder Manuel Velázquez returned from his 2-year loan spell at Malaga, bringing high-level experience back to the core.
And in defense,
Defender Pedro de Felipe, arriving from Rayo Vallecano, had a superb breakthrough season. He eventually benched the Uruguayan nationalized veteran José Santamaría, which really signaled the true changing of the guard in the backline. These players joined the established younger talents like Piri and the supremely gifted winger Amancio Amaro.
and while Di Stefano was gone, the effective departure that completed the transition was that of Ferenc Puskás. He remained officially on the squad list for the 65-66 campaign, but he was, for all intents and purposes, marginalized. Munoz had his mandate, his legal framework, and now he had his Spanish core.
This commitment to an all-Spanish team wasn't merely patriotic symbolism. It fundamentally dictated the tactical identity and the physical requirements of the squad.
How so?
The Yeye team was built on attributes that the club hadn't prioritized since the mid-1950s. Sheer youth, aerobic energy, relentless high-tempo pressing, and positional interchange.
So who are the defining individuals in this shift? Let's start with the player who linked the eras, the one who provided that essential institutional continuity.
That has to be Paco Gento.
Of course.
Gento was the team captain and the lone survivor from that 1956 European Cup winning squad. His presence was just invaluable. He was one of the fastest wingers in the world, even in his mid-30s, but his greatest contribution in 1966 was psychological.
He embodied the history.
He embodied the historical mandate to win. He anchored the legacy, allowing the young players to feel connected to the white legend, while simultaneously setting a monumental, unsurpassed individual record of winning 6 European Cups.
On the attacking front, the technical brilliance was personified by Amancio Amaro.
Amancio was the primary creative and offensive threat. He earned the nickname El Brujo, or the Witch, because of his elusive, almost supernatural ability to beat markers.
What was his style like?
His dribbling was low center of gravity, quick and unpredictable. He wasn't just a scorer, he was a chaos agent, essential for breaking down the disciplined defenses they faced in Europe, and he contributed 5 crucial goals in that winning campaign.
Then we have the center forward, who symbolized the selflessness of this new approach, Ramon Grosso.
Grosso was the workhorse. He led the team in La Liga goals with 11, but his true value wasn't just scoring, it was his relentless off-the-ball running and his willingness to sacrifice personal glory for the overall system.
A team player.
The ultimate team player. He occupied defenders, created space for wingers like Amancio and Gento, and exemplified the team ethos of unity over individual stardom. A stark contrast to the previous era's focus on the superstar goal tally.
And finally, the engine room, the 2 men whose stamina underpinned this entire shift in tactics, Pirri and Ignacio Zoco.
Pirri was the modern box-to-box midfielder, a relentless runner with ferocious stamina, capable of transitioning the team quickly from defense to attack. Zoco played a slightly more disciplined anchoring role.
So more of a defensive screen.
Exactly. He was a defensive midfielder, often dropping deep to act as a defensive screen or even integrating into the back line as a de facto third center back. This partnership was the core defensive and midfield structure, and it demanded far higher aerobic fitness than the older, more static lineups.
And we have to touch on the fascinating dynastic element involving the defender Manuel Sanchis.
It's a remarkable piece of club history, really. Manuel Sanchis Martinez played defense in the 1966 final. He would later father Manuel Sanchis Hontiuelo, who went on to become an iconic defender for the club in the late 80s and 90s, winning the European Cup La Septima in 1998.
Incredible. It perfectly illustrates this era as a bridge, literally, a familial bridge of institutional success across generations.
It does.
So, if we look at the tactical evolution, Munoz moved away from the old structured formations and embraced fluidity.
He had to. The traditional 3-2-5 system of the 1950s, the famous WM formation, relied on very specific positional duties and static attacking lines. Munoz shifted towards a system that varied dynamically between a 4-2-4 and a 4-3-3.
What did that mean for the players on the pitch?
It required fullbacks like Pachin and Sanchis to push forward, knowing Zoco and Pirri would cover the central space. It allowed the forwards Amancio, Grosso, Gento more freedom to interchange positions.
And how did that change the physical demands?
It was a massive leap. The system demanded high aerobic fitness, necessary for implementing a high-pressing style that sought to win the ball back high up the pitch. This was a young man's game, predicated on running and quick transitions. By instilling this modern, flexible system, Munoz not only won in 1966, but essentially installed the footballing mindset that would define the club's play for the next decade.
We've established the revolutionary nature of the team, the youth, the fitness, the tactical shift. But for all this successful modernization and the glamorous yay identity, the 1965-66 season at home was frustratingly defined by disappointment.
It creates a crucial narrative tension for you, the listener. This was a championship-caliber team that simply could not finish the job domestically. The La Liga title race was relentless, turning into a 3-way knife-edge struggle involving Real Madrid, their fierce cross-city rivals Atletico Madrid, and CF Barcelona.
And this was a long season.
A marathon that ran from September 4th, 1965, right up until April 3rd, 1966.
Real Madrid actually started with all the momentum, didn't they? They dominated the first half of the season.
They absolutely looked dominant. Madrid controlled the top spot for 9 separate match days. They finished the league campaign with an impressive 19 wins, the highest overall win record in the league. Their goal scoring was prolific, 53 goals. Everything pointed towards another predictable league title, which had become the institutional norm.
So how did they allow Atletico Madrid to sneak past them? What was the crucial blow that cost them the title by the narrowest of margins?
The title slipped away during a brutal stretch of fixtures in late March. The decisive moment came on match day 29, Sunday, March 27, 1966. Real Madrid traveled to the Camp Nou to face Barcelona.
A huge game.
A massive game. And despite a goal from Gento, Madrid lost 2-1. That day goals from Rife and Zabala secured the victory for Barcelona.
And that defeat was seismic for the table.
It was decisive. That 2-1 loss right near the end of the campaign shattered their momentum and critically allowed local rivals Atletico Madrid to leapfrog them into first place. Atletico held on tightly to that lead.
So the final standings.
When the season concluded, Atletico Madrid won the league with 44 points, beating Real Madrid, who finished second with 43 points. The championship was lost by a single agonizing point. Losing to your bitter rival in the final stretch and seeing the title go to your other local rival generates immense pressure.
The pressure was relentless, and the frustration didn't stop with the league. The Copa del Generalissimo campaign also ended in a stumble, highlighting the severe exhaustion of this young, domestically sourced squad.
It really emphasizes how thin Muñoz's core squad was. They managed the early stages of the Cup, easily overcoming Real Gijón, and they scraped past CD Malaga, though that required a replay.
Which speaks to the intensity of the schedule.
Exactly. The lack of depth was showing. But they were eventually knocked out in the quarterfinals by Real Betis.
And the scheduling here provides a massive clue as to the team's mental and physical state.
Precisely. The second leg of that quarterfinal against Betis was scheduled just 4 days after the intense, highly emotional European Cup final in Brussels.
4 days. Wow.
Real Betis had won the first leg 3-2. The exhausted Madrid side, riding the high of the European triumph, could only manage a 2-2 draw in the return leg at the Bernabeu. They lost 5-4 on aggregate.
That sequence, the most physically intense match of their lives, immediately followed by the quarterfinal exit, highlights the critical point. The team was just running on fumes.
The reliance on that core group of fit, young Spanish players meant they simply could not sustain the necessary level of intensity across all three fronts.
So what did that mean for the European campaign?
The lack of domestic silverware, losing the league by 1 point and exiting the Cup, late sharpened their focus entirely on the European Cup. It transformed the international campaign from one of prestige into an all-or-nothing bid for validation. If the Yeye project failed in Europe, the criticism of Muñoz's ruthlessness towards the old guard would have become deafening.
Let's pivot now to that European campaign, which was a study in contradictions. The European Odyssey of 1965-66 was defined by away suffering juxtaposed with absolute clinical magic at home.
That's the perfect way to put it.
It's also worth noting this was the first expanded edition of the tournament, featuring 32 teams, meaning Madrid had to navigate 8 total matches to lift the trophy.
And the journey started with a poignant moment of transition in the preliminary round against Feyenoord. It was a spectacular swan song for the man Muñoz was replacing.
Tell us about the Feyenoord tie.
Madrid looked shaky in the first leg, struggling immensely in the Netherlands and losing 2-1 away in Rotterdam. The pressure immediately ratcheted up for the return leg at the Bernabeu.
But that's when the old guard stepped up.
This is where the old guard delivered one final spectacular performance. Ferenc Puskás, effectively sidelined from the main project, was given a rare start and delivered a legendary swan song. He scored 4 goals in a stunning 5-0 demolition of Feyenoord, netting in the 10th, 20th, 29th, and 86th minutes.
4 goals from the 38-year-old galloping major. What a dramatic, almost ironic way for him to end his European involvement, proving he still had the genius even as the club moved past him.
The 6-2 aggregate win showed the collective scoring power was still there, even in transition. But what really stands out and what defines this generation's European journey is the emerging pattern of resilience.
The vulnerability on the road.
The Yeye team was strangely vulnerable on the road. They either lost or drew in every away leg they played leading up to the final. However, they possessed an almost sacred confidence at home, where they became a relentless scoring machine, netting 19 goals across their home legs. The Bernabeu was their shield and their sword, constantly overturning away deficits.
So let's trace that pattern through the early knockouts.
In the round of 16, they faced Kilmarnock. They managed a 2-2 draw away in Scotland, showing grit but struggling to assert authority. They followed this with a comprehensive 5-1 victory at home, comfortably advancing.
Then came the quarterfinals against Anderlecht, which held significant psychological weight. Why was Anderlecht so crucial?
Because Anderlecht was the team that had humiliated Real Madrid with a preliminary round exit only 3 years earlier in 1963. They represented a recent, painful memory of decline.
And the pattern repeated itself.
It did. The Yeye team lost the first leg 1-0 away in Brussels. The pressure was immense going into the home leg. This wasn't just about advancing, it was about proving that the institutional decline was truly reversed.
How did the young team respond to that pressure?
They executed a brilliant comeback at the Bernabeu, winning 4-2. Amancio Amaro was the hero, scoring twice and displaying the exact kind of individual brilliance Muñoz had invested in. They scraped through 4-3 on aggregate. This tie showed their character, the ability to absorb a loss, return home, and decisively prove their superiority when the stakes were highest.
But the true psychological test, the tie that Muñoz viewed as the genuine validation of his entire project, was the semifinal.
Absolutely. They drew the defending champions, Helenio Herrera's Inter Milan. This was the undisputed master of Catenaccio, the highly organized, deeply defensive system that had crushed Madrid in the 1964 final.
So this is personal for Muñoz.
For Muñoz, eliminating Inter was revenge for the 1964 loss and proof that his young, quick, flexible Spanish side could defeat the most tactically astute defensive European powerhouse.
So how did the new Madrid system tackle the Catenaccio?
The key was speed and positional interchange, which overwhelmed Inter's disciplined man-marking system. In the first leg at the Bernabeu, Piri, demonstrating his box-to-box prowess, scored a crucial early goal in the 12th minute, securing a vital 1-0 lead.
Which meant Inter had to chase the game.
The last thing Herrera wanted.
And the return leg at the San Siro must have been an absolute tactical siege.
It was a masterclass in survival. Madrid endured a relentless onslaught, but their high aerobic fitness and positional flexibility allowed them to transition quickly and punish any positional errors. Amancio scored the crucial away goal, giving them a massive psychological advantage.
So they held on.
Giacinto Facchetti equalized late for Inter, but the damage was done. Madrid secured a 1-1 draw, advancing 2-1 on aggregate. Eliminating the Catenaccio Kings was celebrated in Spain not just as a victory, but as a symbolic eclipsing of the tactical systems that had dominated European football, replacing them with speed and youth.
Breaking that psychological barrier was the emotional peak of the campaign. They had defeated the team that had triggered the entire generational shift. Now they just had one final hurdle. The stage is set for the climax. The 1966 European Cup final, May 11, Heysel Stadium, Brussels. The ghosts of the past were exorcised, but now they faced a unique opponent, FK Partizan Belgrade.
Partizan was an excellent team, representing the best of Yugoslav football, known for their blend of technique and sheer physicality.
And they had a huge scalp in the semifinals.
Crucially, they had eliminated the heavily favored Manchester United, the post-Munich Busby Babes featuring Bobby Charlton and George Best. They were not to be underestimated. They were resilient and dangerous.
Let's detail the all-Spanish starting KY that Muñoz fielded for this historic occasion.
The team featured one major surprise due to circumstance. José Aracastán started in goal due to a late injury to the regular keeper, Antonio Betancourt. The core was that young Spanish engine.
So who was in the lineup?
The starting X-sign, structured in a flexible 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-3 hybrid, was Aracastán, Pachín, Sanchís, De Felipe, Zoco acting as a defensive screen, Piri and Velázquez in midfield, then Serena, Amancio, Grosso, and Gento as the venerable captain.
Partizan, led by coach Abdullah Gegic, featured key figures like Velibor Vasovic, who would later become a legend at Ajax, and Milan Galic. The match began, and it was clear from the outset that Partizan was not intimidated.
Not at all. The first half was incredibly cagey and physical. Partizan utilized their size and technique to dominate possession in key areas and frustrate Madrid's high-tempo attack. Madrid, perhaps feeling the weight of the previous 6 years, struggled to find their rhythm, and the half ended 0-0.
Then at the 55th minute, the nightmare scenario that we introduced at the start of this deep dive materialized.
A feeling of dread swept through the Real Madrid contingent. Milan Galic delivered a threatening cross, and Velibor Vasovic rose above the Spanish defense to head the ball powerfully past Aracastán. The score was 0-1.
Everything was on the line.
The 6-year drought, the pressure of the transition, the memories of the lost 62 and 64 finals all converged. It looked like the young Yeye team, for all their energy, might fail the final test of character.
This is the moment where the Yeye spirit truly had to prove its worth. They were down, with time rapidly ticking away, threatening to undo 2 years of painstaking, ruthless rebuilding.
They needed a spark of individual brilliance, and they got it from the most fitting player. 15 minutes later, the comeback began. In the 70th minute, Ramon Grosso, the selfless center forward, delivered a crucial, smart pass into space. Amancio Amaro, El Brujo, took possession and produced what Spanish sources rightly described as an obra de arte, a work of art.
Describe that goal vividly for us. What did it look like?
Amancio utilized his trademark low center of gravity dribbling, drawing a defender wide, faking a pass, and then using a quick shift of pace to cut into the box. He beat his marker completely, leaving him flat-footed, and then struck the ball with a decisive, low left-footed shot that tucked just inside the post. The keeper had no chance.
The score is leveled 1-1.
And the momentum shifted instantaneously.
And the power of that equalization was immense, because just 6 minutes later, the victory was sealed by an unexpected name, completing a dramatic 6-minute reversal.
The momentum was electric, and Partizan couldn't handle the sudden high-tempo surge. In the 76th minute, the ball came to Fernando Serena, the quick-footed midfielder, outside the box. Now, Serena was not known for his long-range shooting.
But he took it on.
He took a touch, looked up, and unleashed what was immediately dubbed a decisive long-range rocket or missile. It was a magnificent right-footed strike that absolutely screamed past the outstretched Partizan keeper and slammed into the top corner of the net.
A 6-minute, 2-goal blitz that flipped the final on its head. Real Madrid won 2-1. That decisive burst of pure, high-energy yay football secured the club's 6th European Cup triumph. The drought was over.
The legacy of this victory runs deep, and it's complicated. It cements the institutional continuity of Real Madrid while simultaneously setting the stage for decades of European frustration.
Let's start by reiterating the monumental achievement of Paco Gento.
Gento's individual record is just absolutely unassailable. Winning his 6th European Cup title remains unsurpassed, a record only equaled in the modern era by players who have benefited from the Champions League format. He played in a joint record 8 finals.
He was the through line.
He was the living, running embodiment of the club's institutional goal. Gento's longevity ensured that the intense, sacred winning culture of the 1950s was physically and psychologically transmitted directly to the new generation.
And institutionally, what does the success of the Yeye generation prove for the club?
It was the ultimate vindication of the transfer ban and Muñoz's strategy. It proved that the club could achieve the absolute highest level of success. The European Cup, exclusively with Spanish, often homegrown, talent. This all-Spanish 11 remains a unique milestone in the history of European Cup champions. They fulfilled Bernabeu's demand for rejuvenation without resorting to the global marketplace.
This victory was also highly politicized in Spain, given the socio-political backdrop of the Franco regime.
It was unavoidable. As we've discussed, this was an all-Spanish 11, winning the biggest prize in Europe during a period of national self-isolation enforced by the regime. The victory was immediately and enthusiastically leveraged by the Franco regime as a potent symbol of Hispanidad and national unity.
A propaganda tool.
It was presented as proof of what Spanish talent, industry, and national discipline could achieve on the world stage. While the motivations of the players and the club were purely sporting, the political apparatus certainly exploited the powerful optics of the national core succeeding in Brussels.
Now we come to the profound irony, which makes this victory feel less like the start of a new dynasty and more like a historical bridge.
The irony is immediate and heavy. Despite the Yeye team proving its capability by dominating La Liga for the rest of the 1960s, winning 5 consecutive domestic titles right after 1966, their European success was a flash in the pan.
A one-off.
Real Madrid entered what would become a massive European desert. They would not reach another European Cup final until 1981, and crucially, they would not win the competition again, earning La Septima until 1998. The 1966 win marked the final success of the original White Legend spirit before an astonishing 32-year gap.
And there's a final, satisfying historical circle involving the opponent they defeated in Brussels that year.
It connects the two great droughts. When Real Madrid finally broke that 32-year curse in 1998, defeating Juventus in the final, the winning goal was scored by Predrag Mijatovic.
And Mijatovic was a former.
A highly regarded former FK Partizan player, the very club that Real Madrid defeated in 1966 to secure their 6th title. It completes a truly unique piece of historical karma, a bridge built over a generational gap, connecting the end of the first golden age to the beginning of the second through the exact opponent they overcame in the middle.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The defining lessons of the 1965-66 season are clear. This was a triumph engineered by necessity-forced domestic talent reliance due to a transfer ban, coupled with the fearless, ruthless, and visionary management of Miguel Munoz.
It's a fundamental story about institutional DNA. Munoz proved that the club's mandate to win in Europe could survive the loss of irreplaceable legends.
And the team itself.
The Yeye generation's defining characteristic wasn't domination, but resilience. They survived every stumble on the road, performing necessary miracles at the Bernabeu and ultimately delivering a 6-minute comeback when it mattered most.
The triumph of 1966 was meant to inaugurate a new dynasty that would match the 5 in a row of the 1950s. But instead, it became this unique, powerful, and iconic bridge over a massive historical gap that lasted over 3 decades.
It did.
So what does the Yeye team's ability to win the biggest prize only once in the post-Di Stefano wilderness tell us about the nature of truly legendary clubs, where sometimes the most profound victories are those that simply secure institutional survival rather than ensuring decades of absolute domination?
It's a fascinating question. It suggests that sometimes just keeping the legend alive is the greatest victory of all.
Something to mull over as you consider the cost of replacing the irreplaceable in any walk of life.